Hello, everyone, and welcome to another edition of Mormon Stories podcast. I am one of your two co-hosts for today, John DeLynn. I'm super happy to have you with us and really excited about today's episode. And today I am joined by my occasional co-host, Samantha Shelley. Hey, Sam.
Hi, John.
Thanks for coming.
Thank you for having me again.
So on a scale of 1 to 10, how excited are you for today?
Oh, I'm at a 10. I've been so excited about this since you asked me.
Not 11?
Yeah, okay. 11, John.
Sam, I've loved the feedback on your story. So it was so great to have you on Mormon Stories recently. If you haven't checked out Margie and my interview with Samantha, it's great.
Though it is currently unlisted, right? Because of an editing mishap.
Oh, thanks for mentioning that.
Where John spilled all my secrets to the internet.
We're getting that fixed. Anyway, it's great to have you, Sam.
Thank you.
All right. Well, I'm super excited for today's episode. One of the staples of Mormon Stories podcast, kind of our bread and butter, is people's faith journeys. And interestingly, the way that we brought Samantha on the very first time she was ever on Mormon Stories was when our interest was getting piqued about what was going on with millennials in the Mormon church. It won't be a surprise to people who follow Mormonism to know that the Mormon church, the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints in 2022, is having a really hard time keeping its millennials and its Gen Zers. I've heard reports, the church isn't public with its retention or activity rates, but I've heard as high as 80% of, LDS church members raised in the United States who are in their 20s or early 30s have left the church. And that's not, converts. That's people raised in the church who, identified as Mormon growing up. So the church is really losing its youth. This isn't unique to Mormonism. This is kind of every religion in the United States is having trouble hanging on to its young people. So in one sense, today is just a very important and sort of check-in with, how is the church dealing with its millennials and, to what extent, is it struggling to keep them? So that's going to be part of today. A lot like the Losing Mormon Millennials episode that you did, Sam. But in another sense, it's also going to be some new stuff. So today we are interviewing a really cool couple. The couple that we're bringing on is Ellee Duke and Auz Engemann. Hi, guys. Welcome to Mormon Stories.
Thanks for having us.
Yeah. And I'll just kind of give just an intro in the sense that Ellee Duke, what's interesting is that Ellee was raised in Draper, Utah. If I had to pick like the 4 most intense areas in Mormonism to be raised, it would sort of be Provo / Utah County, maybe add Alpine and Highland into there. But certainly the Sandy Draper area can be super intense. And then maybe I'd add like Bountiful and then of course Rexburg. So in this, I don't know that how many people we've interviewed on Mormon Stories that were actually raised LDS in Draper. So you get to represent Draper, Ellee.
Juicy.
How does that feel? Yeah.
Great. Yeah.
And Auz, you were raised in Provo.
Sure was.
And that's always worth covering is just what it's like. And of course, Cara Burrell was raised in Provo and others, but we're always interested to hear what it's like to be raised in the belly of the beast,
the Mecca.
As some say.
Yes.
Yeah.
The Mecca.
Yeah. So that's going to be one of the angles that we cover today. Cool. And then what's also just another layer of interesting to today's episode is that Ellee and Auz, they both live in the LA area and they're both creative artists. And that's how I learned about Ellee. And I'll just read her bio really quick. Ellee Duke is an American artist, songwriter, and entrepreneur, blending real-life stories with original, quirky pop beats. Ellee Duke has a gift for expressing complicated feelings in an accessible, vibe-setting way. Ellee got her first Billboard #1 with the song she co-wrote called Craving, a 2019 collaboration on with Artie and Audion. Is that right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's right.
She's also cut songs for Walk the Earth, who I've heard of, and Alexander Stewart and Allie Simpson, and is currently CEO of her own label, New Me. You've also toured with Leanne Rimes.
I have, yeah. And I opened for Rachel Platten a couple years ago.
Yeah.
Yeah, we out here.
That's all super cool.
It's a huge get for you, John.
I'm excited, yeah. And if that weren't enough, this week is kind of the global debut of a new single of yours, right?
Yes, last Thursday, the 7th, my single Deeper came out, which kind of encompasses a large portion of my story with this whole thing. Why we're here.
Yeah, and that's how I'm super old, and so I haven't heard of your music. I'm just being honest, but I did run across it on TikTok and Instagram because it's a super cool song. I shared it with my wife and kids. I have kids your age, and it actually relates to kind of how I raised my kids and how they often felt being raised Mormon. So it was something that I and my family just immediately connected with. So
really
Deeper
cool.
is a cool single. We're really excited, and we're going to play it in its entirety later on in this episode, in the space where it makes most sense. So it's kind of like a global debut of your single.
Yes, thanks for having us for it.
Yeah.
It's an honor.
And it's directly related to faith crisis stuff.
Yes.
Mormon faith crisis.
100%.
Yeah.
Yep.
So in the tradition of like having Tyler Glenn on and Mindy Gledhill and Sarah Sample and several other performing artists, we love to bring on performing artists who discuss Mormon faith crises in their art. So
I love that. Yeah.
Yeah. And then Auz, you are also an aspiring filmmaker in the LA area.
Yes, sir.
And that's cool too.
Yeah. I've been doing film for the last 3.5 years and trying to direct. That's what I'm trying to do. So
Yeah. And you two are married, is that right?
correct.
Yes, we are. 4 years.
4 years.
4 years
That's
in
an
May.
achievement.
4 years this May. Yep.
So hopefully that gives everyone a sense for what you're in store for today. It's going to be your traditional, longer form, epic, heartfelt, authentic Mormon Stories interview. You asked if swearing was okay, and my answer was be authentic, right?
Yes, sir.
And so we'll give it a PG-13 rating where there may be a swear word here and there, and that's just because we're trying to keep it real.
Yes. I just love it.
Yeah. Okay, Sammy, is there anything I forgot or anything you want to add before we jump in?
No, I think you're doing great. I'm so excited.
All right. Okay, so Oz, you're older.
Yes.
Is that right?
Correct. 31.
He
So
looks 21 though.
I have a baby face.
The facial symmetry on both of these, I can't bear it.
Well, who wants to begin? Whose story should we tell first? Maybe Ellie, we should start with yours.
I think so.
Great.
Is that okay?
Yeah, that's great.
So we'll do your Mormon story first,
Perfect.
and then we'll pause, jump to Oz's, and then we'll talk about when you guys meet
Yeah.
and how it all unfolds.
Cool.
Great.
How does that work?
Yeah, perfect.
All right. So Ellie, where does your Mormon story begin?
So, yeah, I was born in Sandy and grew up in Draper. So when I was 7, my parents bought this old farmhouse and we were remodeling it, basically. My parents took it on, and me and all my brothers were just painting, sanding. My mom made this like vinegar spray that we took down all the wallpaper with, like just totally like DIY, just like thrown into remodeling this house together, which was amazing. So that was like a really beautiful part of my childhood because I grew up on this big piece of property, and I feel like we didn't have cell phones, and like nowadays I feel like social media is just such a huge thing. And so I really treasure that time that like we spent there and just as kids and growing up. My family is Mormon, and I grew up LDS, so that was a huge part of my upbringing as
Are
well.
your parents multi-generational? Did they like pioneer ancestry kind of thing?
Yeah. Yep. As far as I know. Yeah, I know for sure. So my dad's mom is a convert, and she converted when she was like 18. And then my mom's parents have been members like their whole lives and grew up in it. Yeah.
Where'd your parents meet? Do you know?
They met in Sandy at a singles ward, I believe.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
And then they were married, I think, like, not long after.
Temple married?
Temple
Okay.
married.
Okay.
My My mom was like 19, I think. And yeah, total cuties.
And how many total kids did they have?
3. So I have an older brother and a younger brother.
Okay.
So middle child.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. And so were you born in Draper, Sandy area or?
Born in Sandy,
Okay.
but grew up in Draper. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So my parents, they lived in like Sugar House for a while. And then when my mom got pregnant with me, they lived in South Mountain. And then we bought the farmhouse and I lived there till I was about 16. And then we moved to another house.
So, okay. And people outside of Utah are going to have no idea what we're talking about, like Draper, Sandy. These are suburbs that are like 15 minutes south of downtown Salt Lake City.
Yeah.
And I'll just say my impression of Sandy Draper is like almost, I don't know if Edward Scissorhands is kind of the right metaphor, but just like really nice houses.
Yeah.
Middle to upper middle class, like professionals largely that probably work downtown and they commute in the rush hour traffic along I-15. But like, I don't want to say it's the most affluent Mormon area in Utah because that'd be Park City or probably the Avenues or the East Bench along, but like middle to upper middle class, kind of an intense form of Mormonism. That's how I think of Sandy Draper. And my mom lived there for like 20 years. So
Cool.
But tell me if that's, so when you talk about like growing up in a barn, I'm like, what? Like, what, was it next to a Home Depot? Like, how does that work?
Oh my God.
But this might have been before Draper got overdeveloped.
It was honestly like right before. So like there was this huge like field across from this like farmhouse that my parents bought, and it's now just homes. Like there's just it's just stacked with homes, apartment buildings. So yeah, but at the time it was still a little more rural, I would say. But then, so my parents, we sold that house and they built a brand new house up in kind of the more mountainous area of Draper, which is kind of more of a neighborhood of what you're talking about, more like kind of middle upper class.
But by the Draper Temple or more south by South
a little
Mountain?
further south, or no, a little further. I don't know directions.
North.
Okay, north.
North of the temple.
North of the temple.
Because that was another big thing when they built the Draper Temple, which is southeast Salt Lake Valley. That was kind of a big deal, the Draper Temple, right?
Oh, it was a huge deal. Yeah, I remember the open house, and it was just like everyone was just raving about it, and it was this huge deal.
Because it's this gorgeous temple up on the hill.
Oh, yeah.
In this really kind of affluent Mormon community.
Yeah, it was a huge deal. Yeah.
Yeah. And it was the only temple on the east side of the valley other than the Salt Lake Temple.
Yeah.
Because it was always the West Jordan Temple, which is where I took out my endowments on the west side. And this is just total insider baseball, but in Utah, I had a friend once tell me more east, more good. And what he means by that is Utah is split right down the middle by I-15. And it doesn't matter kind of where you are along the I-15 corridor, whether it's Farmington, Bountiful, Davis County, all the way up to Ogden and Brigham City, or all the way down to Provo. If you're on the east side of I-15, it's known as more affluent, more educated. And then if you're on the west side, it's always viewed as kind of maybe less educated, less affluent.
That's so funny.
Kind of thing.
Interesting.
Yeah.
That's new to you guys?
No, not to me.
I didn't know that.
Yeah, that's kind of like the stereotype, I guess.
So so the only reason I'm saying that is like West Valley was, West Jordan was the temple, that was for people over in Magna and people over in West Valley. So have Draper get its own temple was, it's got,
Draper.
The more affluent get their own temple. You know what I mean?
Bougie.
And my parents worked in the Draper Temple as temple workers for like 15, 20 years.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, so I have a Draper connection too. That's why I'm geeking out about Draper. How was it for you though? Was it suburban? Was it intense? Did it feel affluent or not? Or
yeah, I mean, I definitely I remember because I went to Alta High School. I remember when I was in high school, I had quite a few friends who got a brand new car for their 16th birthday, which I didn't. My parents let me use a car, but it wasn't here's a brand new car, which is fine. But yeah, there definitely was a lot of people that had money, but I would say it was still kind of there was still diversity, but a lot of wealthier people and families, and just Pepperwood was kind of a big part of growing up. Pepperwood parties and
What's Pepperwood?
Pepperwood is like this really kind of like a bougie neighborhood. And
I think that's where Denver Snuffer lives.
Ooh.
I mean, we're kind of talking about.
He doesn't live in a yurt somewhere?
No. He lives like in Sandy Draper, like fancy east up close towards the mountain kind of Draper.
Yeah. So I had
Pepperwood.
I had a few friends who lived in Pepperwood, and whenever you heard like, oh yeah, I live in Pepperwood, it was always like, oh, like wow, you know.
Pepperwood parties.
Pepperwood parties, yeah. Kissing parties, yeah. Did you not know about Pepperwood parties?
What's it? No, what's a Pepperwood
All
party?
the
What's
hot
a kissing
goss.
party? What?
So Pepperwood parties was like this end of the year party in high school, and basically people would go and. Do you think there's parents that don't know about what this party was? Because I feel like I'm probably like ratting so many people out.
It's good.
You would just go and like kiss people. Like it was literally like, how many people can I kiss? Yeah, I'm not joking. My senior year, I didn't.
These are Mormon kids?
Oh yeah, just a bunch. I mean, there was people that weren't Mormon too, but yeah, a bunch of Mormon kids just like making out, like at the end of the year party.
Good for them.
Yeah, good times. Good times.
We're jumping ahead, but that's fun. We're setting the stage.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. Okay, so jumping back a bit, you're restoring this barn. You've got 2 siblings.
I didn't live in the barn though. No. You know that, right? The house too was like older farmhouse, and there was a barn. Yeah.
Were you guys flipping it like an investment property you were going to restore and then flip?
I think that was initially like my parents thought, but then once we flipped it, like we just fell in love with it. And like to this day, my parents, they don't regret moving, but I think just like it was such a special place because we all put so much into it. Yeah, it bonded us in like a way because we worked on the house together. Like every summer there was this really long white fence, like a wooden fence around this big field in the front of our house, and we would paint it like every summer. And we hated it, but like I learned how to work at that house.
Important.
Like I learned how to work my ass off.
She looks at Samantha.
I know. It's the eye contact.
I looked at
Get a reaction.
Happy to be
Are you
included.
offended, Samantha?
Are you okay? Are we good?
No,
Is everyone
to
okay?
work my ass off someday.
Yeah, as a parent, I'm like, I want to teach my kids.
But
how to
I'm
work.
really thankful for that we moved there because like I learned so much like moving into that house, and it's just sentimental. I still drive past it. If you're that song by Miranda Lambert, The House That Built Me, I feel like that was how I feel about that house.
We'll add a link to it in the show notes.
Yeah.
What's it near? Just if anybody is like really geeking
It's
out on
on
Mormon
Pioneer
stories.
Road.
Pioneer Road.
And you know like the roundabout right by Draper Park?
Okay, yeah.
So if you go up Pioneer Road just straight and then you take a right on 123rd, I think.
Okay.
It's like right on that road.
Okay.
And there's like they put this like horse fence, like this cool wrought iron horse gate. Can't miss it, honestly.
Okay. All right. So thinking back to kind of pre-adolescence, how Mormon was your family in terms of like scripture study, prayer, like patriarchy,
very,
all that stuff?
Very. Like we would get up at like, 5, 6 a.m. during the school year and like read scriptures as a family, like every day. Say prayers morning and night. We'd always have family night on Mondays. Going to church was just like, it wasn't like an option. It was just like, we're going to church. This is what our family does. And my dad was like a bishop, and then he was also in the High Council. And
Remember
so he
what
had
stake this is?
oh my gosh, I don't remember.
What stake you grew up in? It's fine if you don't.
I'm trying to remember, but I don't.
But if your dad was a bishop, I mean, that's a really high honor within Mormonism, right?
Yeah, he was a bishop, and then.
Do you remember what ages you were?
We still lived on South Mountain, so I was probably like 4 or 5.
Okay, you were young.
I was really young.
So he was called young as a bishop.
He was really young.
Normally they don't call bishops with really young kids.
Yeah, because I was probably 4 or 5, and then my mom had just had my little brother, and then my older brother was probably 7 or 8. So yeah, it was a lot. And he was gone a lot. Like I remember I didn't see him a ton because he was busy serving and doing that. And yeah.
How would you describe, like, I know your parents may watch this and I'm not looking for tea, but like, how would you describe their personalities? Like pious or like laid back and cool, like personality type? How do you?
I would say my dad is like definitely intense, like more of an intense personality. He played football and he's like a really big dude.
Football college or football just?
Yeah, college. He played at the U of U.
Oh.
And he was like a linebacker.
Because you're tall, you're 5'11".
Yeah, my dad's like 6'3", 6'4".
He played football at the U?
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
Oh yeah, big time. Like was like on his way to going pro and then he blew his knee. And so, yeah. That sucked.
Are you comfortable sharing his name if there are any big Ute fans out there? Oh, what's his name?
Yeah, Jim Duke.
Jim Duke.
Yeah.
So he was an offensive lineman for the Utes.
All-star, yeah. And then he played center a bit as well. Oh. But yeah, really, really talented at football. Got like a full ride scholarship and yeah, just killed it. So my dad, I think he has that like athlete kind of, you know, just like tough, big guy. But he's a total teddy bear inside. But definitely growing up, my dad was... yeah, just intense and like strict, but super, super fun guy, but just like had that like authoritative role for sure. And my mom is definitely social butterfly, just like super sweet, super bubbly, really just like the sweetest person you'll ever meet. And my dad's a little more like stoic, I would say. Yeah, really nice when you get to know him, but you can't, like, he's like hard to read. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Okay.
My mom's just like hard on her sleeve. Like you can just see everything she's feeling all the time.
And you said she was Relief Society president?
No,
she never was. Okay.
I don't know. She was never Relief Society president, but she had callings. Yeah, she was in Young Women's for like a long time when I was in Young Women's, which was super fun.
Oh, nice.
Yeah. Okay. But yeah, she's had callings and through the years, you know.
And so would you say your family was pretty orthodox? Like kind of in Mormonism was an intense part of your identity?
Yeah, it was kind of like the whole world. Our whole world was the church, and like kind of every aspect of our life revolved around the Mormon church. Yeah, definitely.
Okay. Mm-hmm. Like for those who want to get a sense for what you mean by that, like were there things your family didn't do or things your family did to kind of really demonstrate your orthodoxy? Like
this, like Sundays were like a very like holy day. So like we couldn't watch like certain movies on Sundays. It was only kind of like certain like church movies we could watch or like music we could listen to. We couldn't play with friends on Sundays. We never went out to eat. We never traveled. Like Sunday was very like set aside as this like...
You didn't go out to eat on Sundays?
Yeah, no, never.
Didn't play with friends on
Didn't spend money, didn't play with friends.
Like maybe Disney movies or church movies, but no like worldly...
Yeah, not even Disney. Just like more so like there's, you know, like Deseret Book?
Yeah.
Like all those kind of movies.
So like Book of Mormon cartoons you could watch.
Yeah,
those.
or like the movies about like missionaries and the old like Book of Mormon movies that were kind of like reenacted, things like that. And then just like I said prior, like we would get up super early, read scriptures every morning. We'd always say family prayers morning and night. Church every Sunday. So
no alcohol, tobacco, tea, coffee.
Yeah, no coffee. Like Word of Wisdom was a huge. My parents were very like, they followed that like very strongly. Yeah. Modesty was like a really big thing, which I fought that a lot.
What did that mean in your family?
I think I was still kind of in the time period of like, I think this is kind of changed now from what I know. I don't really know, but it was, you as a woman are kind of responsible for young men's thoughts. And so if you're showing up to church or like young men, young women's activities, wearing shorts that are too short or showing your shoulders, it was kind of like, you're going to cause them to think bad thoughts. And so it's your responsibility to be modest, because if not, then you're the reason that these boys are going to be, or men or whatever, are going to be having impure thoughts about you or whatever. So my mom was like she tried to be strict with modesty with me, and I definitely rebelled against it quite a bit. Like I got a job teaching guitar lessons when I was like 15. So once I was making my own money, I would like buy the like short shorts from American Eagle, and I would wear the long shorts that she would buy me and then I would change. Like I don't know if she even knows this, but I would take them with me in my purse and I would change after I left. And then I changed back when I came home.
Super common. I don't know, Samantha, if you've heard this, but of Utah Mormon girls, bring to school a second set of clothes, and change into the clothes they really want to wear, when they're in school.
I remember being at this is another example. Like I was at a young women's activity, which we had like weekly, where all the girls in the church of a certain age would all get together, and there was like a leader that would be like in charge of the activity. And we did a swimming party once, and everyone had one-piece swimsuits on except for this one girl that had a bikini on. And we're probably like 12, 13 years old. And I remember the activity day leader called her mom and asked if she could bring her a one-piece swimsuit and I remember feeling like, just all of us kind of like, like she's wearing a bikini. And it was kind of like this shocking thing that so much of her body was showing. And I have just felt bad about that, just because it's like, I remember feeling like judgmental towards her, like, oh, that's bad. And she's so rebellious. And then she was so embarrassed because her mom came and she changed, and it just like, you know what I mean? Just kind of was. And then here I probably just wanted to wear a bikini myself, but didn't feel like I could,
But in Mormonism, bikinis are bad.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. I mean, it's too much skin.
Were you going to say something or ask something, Sam?
Well, I am curious about how you felt about getting baptized. I know we're at 12, 13 right now, but do you remember if it was like much of a decision, or like, were you excited to get baptized? Did it feel scary?
I was excited. Yeah, I was excited. I kind of just, being that young, like I just felt like, oh, this is what all of my family is. And so like, why wouldn't I do it too? It was very like emotional for me. And I just felt honestly like a lot of love, and just kind of like, this is just what I'm supposed to do. But yeah, being that young, like, I don't know if I made the decision because I felt the church was true, as much as I just felt like, oh, this is the next step for me in my life, and my family is going to be so proud of me for doing this. So that was kind of more the general mood, I would say. Yeah.
Cool. You also said you pushed your mum on the modesty.
Yeah.
How much I feel like a lot of people's Mormon stories, especially women, they talk about like various kinds of guilt and shame growing up, and like that, just feeling like you're never doing enough. Did you also have that? Because it sounds like you were pretty like non-rebellious generally.
Yeah, I'm very much a perfectionist. And also being a middle child, like you kind of, I mean, I know everyone's experience is different, but for me, like I always felt like I had to be kind of the peacemaker between everybody. And so from a really young age, like my older brother in school would kind of get in trouble a lot. And then my little brother kind of in school would get in trouble a lot. And so I was always, or like, they'd have things with grades and whatnot, and my parents would get upset. And so I always kind of felt like, oh, I have to be the kid that keeps it together and gets good grades and, just kind of falls in line, I guess would be a good way to put it. And yeah, like when you grow up in this one specific kind of way, and your identity is so intertwined with this religion, it's like everything I did, every waking moment, pretty much, I was thinking about, I have to be good, I have to be polite, I need to be worthy. And from a really young age, like I felt that way. And I had a lot of anxiety as a kid about never being enough, and just kind of always feeling like, what else do I need to do to prove that I'm a good kid and a worthy member of the church? Like I kind of just always felt like that since I was super young. Yeah.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah.
Do you remember your beliefs as a child? Like, did you even try to pray yourself?
Oh yeah.
Did you talk about your beliefs as a child before adolescence?
Yeah, I think because I prayed and read scriptures so much with my family, that was just such a huge part of what we did. And my parents talked a lot too about like personal scripture study. And so usually after our family scripture study, we'd have like our personal scripture study where we'd go read our scriptures. And my parents taught us a lot about prayer and just like, thanking God for things and asking for things. And yeah, so as a young kid, like I, you know, like super young, was like reading the Book of Mormon by myself and saying prayers by myself. And yeah, I definitely had good feelings like doing that, you know. I was just like super immersed in it. And so I just like, it's all I knew, you know? And so I just was like, let's go, like giddy up. We're all out here reading our scriptures and praying. And so I did it, and I definitely felt good things, you know, and felt connected to something at a lot of points, you know? Yeah.
So it was working for you as a kid.
Yeah, definitely. Definitely working for me as a kid.
Do you remember, because I ask everyone this, but especially musicians, do you remember any primary songs that meant a lot to you? Any favorites?
Yeah, A Child's Prayer. I really love that one a lot.
What'd you love about that?
I think it was just like the melody, and I don't know, like it was always my favorite to sing in primary. And I think it was just because it felt the most honest. It was just genuinely asking, like, are you really there? And like, do you actually answer my prayers? And I think as a young kid, I'd subconsciously just, that felt like the most real kind of just way to say something, you know? And so that was the one I always felt the most connected to. And when we'd sing in church and stuff, I feel like I always sang that one really, like I would stand up straighter, kind of, you know?
There's kind of verse 1 where the kids sing in the Heavenly Father.
Yeah.
And then there's the second verse where what? Pray he is there.
Yeah. Speak, he is listening. Yeah.
Even
It's like, is it the parents singing back to the kid? Is that right? You are his child, his love now surrounds you.
Yeah.
He hears your prayers.
Yeah, it kind of switches.
He loves the children. And then it goes into a round, right?
Oh,
Heavenly
yeah.
Father,
And you'd like layer it.
there.
Yeah.
Speak, he is there.
Yeah.
Right? Mm-hmm. That's a great one.
It is.
Did you ever hear that one, Samantha?
Yeah, I've heard it.
You have no idea what we're talking
That round
about.
slaps. I love a round.
Oh, it does slap. It slaps.
honestly, even as an adult, like growing up, I would listen back to that song and be like, wow. Like,
It's a good
it like
song.
it would hit me hard even as an adult.
Yeah.
So everyone pause this episode.
Listen
and
to
go
the round.
Listen to,
Or
to
John can just, you can sing
Heavenly
it real quick.
Father, are you really there? I'm not going to inflict everyone. It's part of my shtick. Anyway, thanks for entertaining that.
Of course, I got you.
Okay, so yeah, so you're having like an idyllic, is it fair to say? I mean, your dad's bishop, you're restoring a barn, you're like Mormon and praying to Heavenly Father.
Yep,
It sounded like
everything's
an
groovy.
idyllic Mormon, and you're in Draper, Utah,
Yeah.
almost in the shadows of the everlasting hills. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? Like, this is sounding like an idyllic Mormon upbringing. Sammy, what do
Definitely.
you think?
Yeah,
So
I mean, so far based on what you've said, it sounds like well, maybe there were like more positive elements in your Mormon upbringing than maybe some people have. And so it didn't feel quite so horrible.
Oh.
It sounds like you had a nice childhood.
Yeah, I definitely did.
That's how I think of my Mormon upbringing. Is awesome. So
Yeah.
Okay. So anything else you want to share about your pre-adolescent years, either that happened to your family or that happened to you, that's important for your story?
Pre-adolescent, is that like
Preteen.
preteen?
Yeah.
Yeah, no, I was just a happy kid, and I wasn't too worried about. I had anxiety as a kid, but honestly, I wasn't too worried about much. You know, everything just kind of felt right, and my parents were great parents, and we just had our rules, and as long as I was following the rules, like I always felt okay. You know.
So you're living the Utah Mormon girl dream.
Yep.
All right.
Sorry.
Yeah.
Just wanted to know, did your singing talent become apparent in early childhood?
Yes. So when I was 5 years old, my parents put me in piano lessons, and I hated it, but I didn't hate the fact that I could go home and I started to learn the notes and the chords, and I started to write my own songs. So my teacher at the time would get really frustrated because I would come to our lessons and I'd be like, look at this new song I wrote, but I would never practice like any of the songs she gave me. And so I think my parents were like, they were really supportive of it because I think they were just like, okay, this is cool that you're finding this outlet and you're not really practicing. But they kind of said, like, if you guys can just learn how to play the hymns, then you can kind of be done with lessons, basically, which I never learned how to play the hymns. I just kept trying to write my own songs. But I just wanted to learn, like, I wanted to learn the Disney songs, and I wanted to learn songs that I could sing and play because, yeah, as just a super young kid, like the Disney movies and...
Which ones?
Like Pocahontas and Mulan, and like the music from Cinderella, like Snow White, Beauty and the Beast, like just kind of like the OG Little Mermaid, like the music from those movies. I would watch them over and over and over, and I would learn the songs and I would sing it. And
were you more Ariel or more Belle? Which were you?
Probably
The
Belle.
two genders.
Probably Belle, honestly. I loved a bad boy, like the Beast.
Gaston?
Yeah,
Gaston.
or not Gaston. He was gross.
He's a bad boy.
But the Beast, like, I was like, oh, he's just misunderstood. You know? Till as old as time. Yeah, I was obsessed.
Was that Celine Dion? Did you do a Celine Dion?
I don't know if I did. Yeah, I kind of
good.
did.
Yeah, I was getting the Celine.
Yeah, and then my mom had this giant boombox. I mean, it was literally huge. And she got all these different CDs when we were remodeling the house. And so she'd just play, you know, Celine Dion. She'd play Martina McBride. She'd play, I'm trying to remember who else, like a lot of country music. And like Sarah Bareilles, Colby Calais, like kind of all that stuff. My mom, and then I would just be out there with her painting and I'd just be singing and learning all the words. And yeah, just from a really young age, I was just like so obsessed with music and writing songs.
So in addition to the Disney soundtracks, you mentioned some artists, but I'm curious what artists became like the ones you really, really loved and dug and gravitated to.
I was obsessed with Celine Dion, like
Okay.
super young. And then it kind of morphed into like Hilary Duff, like Disney Channel kind of teens, or like those girls I just looked up to, like That's So Raven, like her music, or like the Cheetah Girls. And then Taylor Swift, I was obsessed. I mean, I think I was 11 or 12 when Teardrops on My Guitar came out, and I was like, okay, I have to learn guitar. And so Rihanna, I was obsessed with Rihanna, and like Beyonce, Jesse McCartney, I was convinced I was going to marry him. Backstreet Boys, I was obsessed. I thought Nick was so hot, like the lead singer. His little like white or blonde tips, you know, how all the boys like had that for a phase.
Yeah, frosted tips.
Frosted tips, yeah. Yeah, it was just, and then I got into John Mayer. I got super into like rock. I loved, I would watch American Idol as a super young kid, and every time at recess, like whoever was like the top 2 girls, I'd always be like, oh, I'm this person. Like at recess, when me and my friends would like play pretend games, I'd always be the name of someone on American Idol. And everyone's like, who is that? And I'm like, it's like this girl on American Idol. So yeah, I was just obsessed with all things music and anyone who sang, really. I was just like, oh, yeah.
Was there a point where you remember like, I want to do that? Like where you're actually seriously thinking, I want to?
I think I was like 11. I saved up all my allowance and I went to Radio Shack and I bought this pink Barbie karaoke machine. And at every family party, I would like make my family listen to me sing. Oh. And I'd come out and I would get like instrumental versions of like CDs. And I would sing NSYNC and Backstreet Boys and Hilary Duff and like all those like OG early 2000s artists. And I just loved it. And I think in my mind, I was just like, this is what I'm going to do. And like whenever anyone would ask me, I'd be like, oh, I want to be a singer when I grow up. I want to be a songwriter. Yeah. Like, you know, from 5 to 11, that like really just like developed quickly.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. And you hear about like these parents that are like, I don't know, showbiz parents, I don't know what to call them, where they're like
a momager.
Yeah. Yeah. Like David Archuleta's dad or whatever. I don't
Yeah.
know. Like, did your parents glom onto that and really like, we're going to get you in all the lessons and tap and dance and we're going to make you a star? Or was it more just like, okay, go figure it out, you know?
I would say like they weren't like it wasn't they were like really supportive, and I don't feel like it was in a way that was like, oh, we're gonna like live through you with this thing that you're doing, you know. It was more so like my mom is like my biggest fan, and like she loves, like when I was super little, like I would write songs and she'd always want to hear them, and they really believed in me and like believed that I had talent. So they got me into singing lessons, and so I took that for a while. And like it wasn't until high school that I kind of, you know, people are like asking you, oh, where are you going to go to college? And like, what are you going to study? And what, you know, what's the next steps for you? And it was in high school that I started making trips to Nashville, and my parents like took me out there, like paid for it. They helped me go out there because we didn't really know how to do that. Like, how do you do this as a job? And everyone that we had talked to was like, you need to get signed by like a label or a publishing company or somebody that has a team that like knows what to do with a talent of songwriting and singing. And so my parents definitely just like stepped to the plate and were like, cool, you want to do this? Like, we'll try to help you figure it out. So they were really supportive. Yeah. Like from the beginning.
Other than taking lessons, starting early on, singing lessons, was it classical or was it pop vocal lessons?
So I actually took from David Archuleta's vocal coach, Dean
wow.
Kalin.
Oh.
And so it was, yeah, like.
That had to have been expensive for your parents.
Yeah, it wasn't cheap, for sure. And I think I took from him for about like 9 months to a year maybe, and got so many great gems out of that. And then he ended up, because he has like a direct connection with American Idol, and so he gets like a kind of private tryout for his students. And so I ended up doing that when I was like 17.
You tried out for American Idol?
I did, yeah.
We're jumping ahead, but we'll jump back. But
yeah, I made it to Hollywood Week, and we can jump back. But at the same time, I had been going to Nashville and gotten offered a record deal at the same time that I made it to Hollywood Week on American Idol. So I kind of had to choose which one to do, and I didn't choose American Idol. So I called the producers and I was like, yo, I'm going to go a different route, and thanks so much for the opportunity. And that was
man, too big for American Idol.
I know. I was like, what a flex.
So went from 11 to Nashville.
Yeah.
What were you doing in Utah to build your career?
Yeah, so when I was 13, I met Paul Cardall and Trevor Price, who was...
Paul, just for viewers and listeners who don't know, sorry to interrupt.
Yeah,
Paul's been on MormonStories, so he's like a really well-known global pianist, composer, who's probably had more Spotify listens of Mormon hymns than anyone in the world, because he would do piano compositions of Mormon hymns.
His own like renditions. Yeah. And they're, wildly successful. He's extremely talented.
And he even wrote a hymn with Bednar that Elder Bednar released.
Oh, no
This
way.
is the Christ or something like that.
Oh, I did not know that.
Not either.
So everyone, well, first of all, shout out to Paul. We love you. Second of all, check out, we'll put in the show notes our link to our interview with Paul Cardall, because he's a stud.
Yeah.
Great guy. And so anyway, so you met Paul.
Yeah, so I met Paul, and he, thought I had some talent. And so he introduced me to Trevor, who was a producer that he had worked with and was really good friends with. And we basically made like a little album of all the songs that I'd written from like, ages probably 9 to 13. And I think it had 10 songs on it. And we recorded it in Trevor's parents' basement in Draper. And I did a photo shoot and basically had this little demo. And then I actually opened for Paul Cardall at one of his shows. I think it was the Draper Amphitheater that I opened for him. And then there was like a couple other different bands in Utah, like the Charlie Jenkins band that used to play here a lot. I don't know if you've heard of them, but I used to open for him a couple times. And then Lindsey Sterling actually was opening for Charlie Jenkins because she was in his band as his violinist at the time.
She's the one that plays the violin.
Yeah,
and
she was like on
dances.
America's Got Talent, and now she's this amazing, huge success. But yeah, I remember like her doing her violin set basically after I had played an opening slot, and then she played in Charlie's band for like the big show. And so I kind of knew her like right before like her career just took off. And so I just kind of got in the scene as much as I could, playing shows. I started playing at weddings. When I was in high school, my high school had this singing competition called Alta Idol that was kind of like a talent show. And I ended up playing original music, and I ended up winning like my sophomore year. And I got like a standing
so this
ovation.
Is like an American Idol.
Yeah, like Alta Idol. And it was like the kind of the first like biggest performance in front of my peers that I'd ever done. And I played a song called You're the Other Half of My Whole that was about this guy I had a crush on. And basically, yeah, ended up winning the talent show or whatever. And then the next year I was a judge for them, like at my high school, which was kind of crazy. And so everyone just kind of started to know me as like this singer that wrote songs. And yeah, everyone was kind of like, you're going to make it big and be famous. And that was kind of the general, I guess, the more I performed, the more I played, the more I did. And then American Idol, people just kind of would say those kind of things to me. And so I kind of felt like, okay, cool, this is what I'm supposed to do. And other people are validating it outside of me, you know?
That's got to be exciting. So
Yeah.
So as you're kind of rising to early stardom, how's your Mormon journey going in terms of like your spirituality, your family's spirituality? You're now in the teen years where you're starting to, mature. You in adolescence, you even start liking boys, maybe, I assume, and dating.
Oh, definitely. Yeah.
But then there's all the messages the church sends about dating and about the purpose in life and the role of women. So let's start by you talking about the messages you received about what a woman's role is as a Mormon woman and how you should behave, especially in dating and relationships with boys. And then also how you were thinking about that relative to your growing career.
Yeah. So in my home, like my dad was very much like patriarchal and like very much in that role. And so growing up, like as a kid, like I definitely kind of felt like my dad was, how do I say it? Like, yeah, just the leader of our family in a bigger way than my mom was. And so that was kind of hard for me at points, to be honest, just because I would see certain things where I didn't want to be told what to do by men or anyone in general. Honestly, I was like a pretty independent kid, even coming into high school. And so I was a very much like goody good two shoes. And so I kind of just kept that to myself as much as I could. But yeah, I definitely noticed that like men were more esteemed than women in a lot of ways and like taken more seriously and made the rules. And women, it was kind of the general consensus, especially growing up in Utah, of like when you're a woman, it's like your role is kind of, to be polite and quiet and not make a stink about things and kind of honor the man and his wishes and kind of support him in his role. And I definitely saw that a bit and didn't like it, honestly, but kind of just dealt with it. But as a really young kid, like I didn't want to get married. Like I was very much like, I don't have any interest in like being a wife. Whereas like a lot of my friends were like already making Pinterest boards of their wedding dress and like all these things that they're so excited about. And I kind of felt like, I guess as a woman that had these big dreams of being a singer and having this really like, having a career. I didn't know like how that would fit into the Mormon religion. And so as I was performing, and when I'd sing at church, and I sang at firesides, and I sang at state conferences, and I sang at girls camp, and all these like church related activities, people would come up to me and they'd start saying things like, oh my gosh, when you're famous, you're going to convert so many people to the church. And when you make it big, you're going to be this example for all of us. And you're going to like save so many people's like souls essentially. And like, oh my gosh, please, you know, you need to always stay modest because my daughters are watching you and so many girls look up to you. And so years and years and years, you know, from probably when I was 13 until I left for Nashville at 18, I had been told that just over and over and over and over. And I think also, you know, feeling like, okay, if I'm going to be Mormon and have a career in this religion, the only way for me to kind of justify it being okay is if it's all kind of for this bigger purpose of me kind of converting people and bringing people to the church and like trying to get to this point where I have this big platform that I can use to be this like example. And so I sort of felt like it wasn't good enough for me to just want to be a singer. It had to be tied to this, you know, much deep, big, intense purpose with the church. Otherwise, it wasn't something I should do or I would be successful at. And so that was ingrained in me from a young age, like feeling like, you know, you start seeing people going on missions and getting married. And I kind of felt like, okay, my mission is becoming the singer and using my example and role and platform to bring people to the church, basically. But not in the Christian market, in like the pop or country or whatever market of music, basically.
So you knew you didn't want to make like Mormon music?
Yeah, definitely. Like none of the songs, I never wrote religious music, really. It maybe like, I did one song for an album that Paul made that he asked me to write a song for called Lift Me Out, which was probably the only like religious song. I mean, that wasn't even religious. It was more just like spiritual because it was just a non-denominational, more like Christian album. But that was like the only song that I'd written about church, I guess. And
it's called Make Me Out?
Lift Me Out.
Lift Me Out.
Yeah. And it's on the Worth of Souls album. And that was a great experience, but I knew I was writing songs about boys and my crushes and heartbreaks and friendships and, you know, childhood and just like, that's what I was like writing about and felt natural to me. Yeah.
So as I think about growing up in the church, like the Osmonds were just such a huge deal. Like in the 70s, Donnie and Marie were a huge deal. They had their own variety TV show. Mm-hmm. And then the Osmond brothers were like a white version of the Jackson 5, and they were a global phenomenon. And Samantha, this ties to you a little bit because as I've traveled through the UK, there are entire generations of UK Mormons who joined the church in the wave of the Osmond sort of phenomenon that swept the world. Is that something? Is this even news to you, Samantha? Or
that is a little bit interesting.
I'm Brit-splaining you.
Thank you, John. Well, my mum, I think, loved Donnie and Marie, but I never remember her mentioning that they were Mormon. I don't feel, so maybe there's a divide because I just feel like a lot of British people don't really care about what religion an American singer is. I don't know.
Yeah.
I had heard of Donnie and Marie growing up, but I hadn't heard of Mormonism, so.
Yeah. In my experience, a ton of British people joined the church heavily influenced by the Osmond wave. And but Mormonism has this rich tradition of celebrities. Gordon Jump was an actor on WKRP in Cincinnati who was also incidentally in one of the original Temple movies. But then you fast forward, there's athletes like Steve Young that are a huge deal. But then in recent years there's Imagine Dragons, there's Tyler Glenn and Neon Trees, there's David Archuleta, and whether it's athletes or musicians, there's always like, do they serve a mission or not? Well, maybe their music is, or their athleticism is their mission, but certainly the church wants, and does. Gladys Knight, another example, put them up front and say, you lead with it's like Scientology. I'm sorry, I'm just kind of fumbling as I think about this, but just like Scientology leads with Tom Cruise, they lead with John Travolta and Kelly Preston.
Yeah.
You know, oftentimes high demand religions lead with their celebrities. And so that Mormonism, I guess I'm saying Mormonism has this rich tradition of global celebrities that have been an important part of, if you're being cynical, kind of the church's PR.
Yeah.
Sure.
But also if you're being faithful Mormon, then they've been an important part of the church's missionary work.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And so I guess I'm just acknowledging that that's a thing, and it was a thing before you ever started.
Yeah.
And it sounds like even in your teen years, you were starting to feel that.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah?
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
100%.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And does that make you feel excited? Does that make you feel awful, pressured? How does it feel?
Yeah, I felt pressure, but I also felt kind of like, yeah, just like, oh, wow, like, you know, a lot is expected of me. And so I felt kind of like honored by it, but also pressured by it, and also excited, but also terrified, because it's like, you just feel this like everyone is watching you, which who knows to what extent people actually even were. But, you know, I just felt, a lot of pressure, I would say. But also, you know, my love and passion for music was real and so like genuine. And the songs that I wrote like literally had nothing to do with religion or Mormonism or anything. But it was just like these two worlds that just kind of combined over time, and just definitely presented a whole slew of things. Yeah. Yeah.
Were you, I have to ask, were you aware of Mindy Gledhill?
Yes, definitely. Yeah, at a young age. And I loved her song, All the Pennies, was one of my favorite songs. And she definitely inspired me a lot with like songwriting and her just like quirky style. And I thought she was just, she's amazing.
Okay. Mm-hmm. All right. So how was your testimony developing in your teen years? Talk about dating. Mm-hmm. Talk if law of chastity kind of stuff was even a thing, worthiness stuff, and your testimony. So talk about testimony, law of chastity, worthiness, dating, all of that. Because that's if that's even relevant.
Yeah. I felt, you know, my testimony was strong. I believed in the church. I believed in, you know, God and the Book of Mormon. And I felt like I had a strong testimony. When I was, I think 12 or 13, I had a lesson about chastity. That was the cupcake lesson. Mm-hmm. And so the teacher,
tell us what that is.
Yeah, the teacher brought in a bunch of cupcakes and took one of them and took a bite out of it. Or no, she had the cupcake, just beautiful, perfect. And she was like, who wants it? And everyone raised their hand. And then she took a bite out of it. And she was like, okay, now who wants it? And some people still raise their hand, you know, to be funny, whatever. And then she pulled out like a jar of dirt and she like poured some dirt on it. And she's like, okay, now who wants it? And like no one raised their hand. And so the lesson was like, this cupcake represents your purity, your chastity, your virtue. And when you give that away to somebody outside of marriage, you're like defiling yourself where no one is going to want it anymore, essentially. And I don't think it was said that like brutally, but it was displayed that brutally. And I know that I was terrified of sex, of anything around that. I just felt like it's bad, don't go there. And so I was like, I got to the point where like, you know, I'd have like a steamy makeout with someone in high school and whatnot.
Well, you talked about those parties. What were they called?
Like I would kiss people, but I would never go past
Pepperwood parties, what were they called?
Pepperwood, kissing parties, yeah. Pepperwood party. Yeah. So I definitely I dated people in high school, but my parents were very much like, you know, having a boyfriend is bad, or like having a serious relationship is bad because most of the boys got to go on missions anyway. And so there's no point to like get serious with somebody. And then if you get serious with somebody, then bad things can happen. And, you know, the physical aspect of it, things can go too far. And so, I was just very scared about that whole world and kind of just tried to steer clear of it. So I just always had a point where I would just like stop, or I just was very, very diligent in like not going past a certain point with anybody. And I didn't my entire like high school years. Yeah.
The implication of that object lesson, that we call those object lessons in Mormonism, and sometimes it's the licked cupcake, it's the chewed gum.
Yeah.
Where they
the
show
dollar
a piece
bill.
of gum and then they chew the gum and say, if you have premarital sex, you're like this chewed gum.
Yeah.
What's the dollar bill one?
I think it's like a brand new dollar bill. It's it's perfect. There's no wrinkles. And then if you just scrunch it up, like it just looks like dirty and just like, ugh.
That one's better though, because it's still like, it still was worth $1.
Right.
You know, so at least that one's not like,
Yeah, that's probably the best of all of them.
I mean, we're laughing.
The least toxic of all of them.
Yeah, but it's intense.
This is kind of heavy, dark stuff.
It's
Another one
intense.
that I know of is the nail with the board. Ooh. So they'll have a board that's got no holes in it.
Yeah.
And then you nail a nail into it, which is a weird metaphor. And then you take the nail out and the hole's still there. And so the message is this is the thing. You said that the message you got was that no one will want you, but as soon as you're adding dirt to the cupcake or a nail to the board, there's also this idea that you're ruined.
Yeah, you're broken, you're dirty, and like there's no hope for you at that point, essentially. And I truly, like, I perceived it that way, like very literally. And I'm sure, everyone has different, like everyone, I believe they have good intentions and they think they're teaching something that probably is going to help you be safe to an extent. But I think that's the struggle, is that a lot of us do take it very literally, and that really hurts your spirit and your identity and your soul and how you feel about yourself based on your decisions. And
especially because it's from such a young age, like being taught that when you're so little, like it just gets ingrained into you, and then you go forward thinking that is just how it's going to be if you mess up, right?
Yeah.
And I feel like it's giving you it's teaching you to shrink your sexuality as much as possible into the smallest box. Whereas I feel like the healthiest, happiest sexuality is like an expansive view. So it's like, the idea that you're like, it's becoming less and less valuable the more you engage with it is wild.
Yeah.
And potentially damaging over time.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
That
was, Mm-hmm.
Okay, so, and if we're taking our best faith interpretation of that teaching, whether this is conscious or not, I can see that whether it's a religion or parents, they don't want their kid having unwed pregnancies. They don't want their kid having STIs. You know what I mean?
100%.
There are practical, they don't want their kid getting assaulted or abused.
Yeah.
And so, there are good intentions behind the
100%.
idea of having kids
have a moral compass with sex and that aspect. Yeah.
And in that sense, it was effective from you in that you graduate. Is it fair to say you graduate from high school, quote, I hate, this is an awful term, I'm air quoting it, a virgin, you were able to obey the law of chastity all the way through high school.
Oh yeah. No one had ever touched my boobs. Literally nothing. Maybe like once, but not for long. Because I would have moved their hand, know? Yeah.
Yeah. And that's how it was for me.
Yeah. Like nothing past kissing at all. Yeah.
And so, so did you think of the church's standards around morality as a good thing through high school, or was it a source of conflict or problem for you?
I like to kind of give this a little more context, even like growing up, my parents, like my dad specifically, like anytime we were watching a movie or a TV show and there was like a kissing scene, or like even just like a very innocent kissing scene that wasn't like, some of the things nowadays where you're like, it's kind of normal now, but like my parents it's like, close your eyes, fast forward, look away. And so even from like a really young age, like even in my own household, like any kind of physical affection on TV and media, like my parents kind of had this attitude towards it that it was bad and like, don't look at it, look away. And so seeing, you know, my parents, these people that I idolize and I, you know, think the world of, like, feel that way about it. Also, they're not very affectionate themselves. And so I feel like I just kind of, I think thought, okay, these things are just bad, and I'll just kind of put them off until maybe I meet somebody in the far, far future, and then maybe it's okay if we get married and blah, blah, blah. But I kind of just like out of sight, out of mind. Like I just didn't engage with it really at all. And just my childhood, it being such a kind of this scary, bad thing, just pretty much planted that seed. So I was just kind of stuck in that place, I would say.
Okay.
Yeah, was that the question? I feel like
No, I mean, I think maybe this comes back into your story a little bit later.
Yes,
this kind of sets
does.
the stage.
Yeah.
But I was just curious, you know, when I graduated from high school, I was proud to be a virgin.
Yes.
I was proud to have lived the law of chastity. It made me feel frankly superior to my high school peers.
I definitely felt that way. And like the senior year Pepperwood party, I remember like I specifically didn't kiss anybody, and I remember tweeting about it because I wanted to be able to be like, I didn't kiss anyone at Pepperwood party, you know? So dumb. But like I felt, like a chip on my shoulder, like, oh, this makes me different and kind of special because I'm not doing all these things that everyone else is doing, you know? Yeah. So I felt the same way, and I felt proud of it, and like, oh, I'm a good person because I did this. It makes me a good person.
Yeah. And that's a double-edged evaluation.
100%.
If you're a good person by living the church's standards, then what happens if you slip up? Yep. Right?
Yeah.
Is that right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. Anything you want to add there, Samantha?
No.
Okay. All right. Okay. So from there, so you're reaching. Okay, what about your testimony really quick?
My testimony,
Yeah, did you have doubts? Did you have questions? You went to seminary. Did you, your relationship with Heavenly Father? How did, all that?
I went to seminary. I think I didn't love seminary. Like they had asked me to be like one of the seminary, like, I don't remember what it was called, but kind of like a leader that, someone that came in and I think a lot of people knew who I was because of my singing and the talent show and Out to Idol and all these things. And so part of me had kind of felt like, are you just asking me because if I'm going to seminary, then maybe like it was, you know what I mean? Like this effect. So I don't know. I think that I didn't end up doing it because I just didn't really want to. And my testimony it was good. It was all I knew. It was just like all I'd been given, all I'd ever known. And so I thought everything was dandy. And like I said before, as long as I was like going to church and like doing everything right, to me, that kind of meant you're good with God. And like my testimony was good because I'm a good person. I'm living worthy. I'm doing everything right, quote unquote. I'm not, doing drugs and drinking and having sex, and I'm going to church and I'm doing all these things. And so for me, that was almost kind of like my testimony of like, I feel like I'm good with God, and if I'm good, God will keep blessing me to like be rewarded in my career or whatever. And so it was just kind of a weird, I don't know, like I would say my testimony was good, but it was kind of just my lifestyle. Like it just wasn't, I just feel like I relied a lot as well on my parents' testimony and the community, and just kind of, it's just what you do here. And I'd never done anything else. So as much as I can say, like, it was good. And I felt as connected as I could, being that was the only thing that I'd ever connected to, Yeah.
Yeah. Makes sense.
Yeah.
So was it tough to juggle your aspiring career in school or not?
Yeah. So I ended up graduating early my senior year. And that was the year that I got offered a record deal by Big Machine in Nashville.
You want to talk about that story?
Yeah, I just started making trips out there when I was like, I think I was 15 the first time I went out. And I ended up meeting this guy named Will Robinson, who was like a really well-known songwriter. He'd had a lot of big hits. He kind of just in passing heard my music at a studio, and was just like, we should write together and I want to introduce you to some people. And so kind of just like slowly but surely, like I planned some more writing trips that he was sort of mentoring, and my mom would come out with me and, you know, we'd get dinner with him and he was introducing me to people, and he ended up introducing me to like all the labels and all the publishers and all the music companies. And he just really believed in me, and I had tried out for American Idol, and he was kind of one of the people that was like, you know, if you do American Idol, first of all, you might not win. And second of all, there's kind of like a stigma sometimes about artists that have done American Idol, because not a ton of them go on to like really have a huge successful career. Like David Archuleta has, Carrie Underwood, Chris Daughtry, Kelly Clarkson, and then you're kind of like, who else? You know? So he kind of was saying to me like getting a record deal would be like the better move. And so that was a big part, I think, too, of kind of me feeling like, okay, American Idol probably isn't the best path. And then, yeah, within a week, I met with Big Machine. I played him some songs.
Really quick.
Yeah.
What was it like to audition? Like, was your audition ever like televised?
I think they televised my audition. Yeah.
Well, that's a huge deal. Was that your first national televising of your work?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And like, was your whole high school super stoked about it? And like,
I think they were, but then it's like there was this news article in the Utah paper that like I wasn't doing it anymore, and I was like moving to Nashville. So people were like excited, but then it's like I wasn't on the show. So then it was just kind of like, oh, okay. But yeah, it was cool. It was definitely.
You want to talk about just what it's like to audition?
Yeah, like I mean, it was really intense. There was tons of people. They had all these tents set up in this. I remember, I think it was at the Staples Center or some like big arena. And
in LA?
No, in Utah, in Salt Lake.
The Delta Center?
Or sorry, the Delta Center.
Vivint, whatever.
Yeah.
Energy Solutions, whatever.
Yeah, they had literally just tents separating people auditioning. And so I went through, I think it was like 6 or 7 rounds of auditioning.
Do you remember you sang your own songs or?
No, I sang covers. I sang Yellow by Coldplay. Yeah.
I did a cover of that when I was a teenager.
Really?
It's on YouTube still, right?
Yeah.
Oh,
maybe.
We'll put a link to that in the show notes.
It's a great song.
So good. Yeah, and so then it was Harry Connick Jr., Keith Urban.
Wait, which Harry Connick song?
Huh?
Which Harry Connick Jr.
No, I'm
song?
saying the judges at the time.
What?
Was Harry Connick Jr., Keith Urban, and J-Lo.
Oh.
I think it was just those 3.
What the? You sang in front of them?
Yeah. So I sang in front of them. J-Lo didn't like me. But Keith and Harry loved me and were like, we're going to put you through. And so I got my golden ticket, and Ryan Seacrest is so short. Like my dad was there too. And my dad's like 6'4", and Ryan Seacrest was just this tiny little man. And like, so like his face, like he doesn't age. I was like, oh my gosh, you look like a wax figurine. But he was super nice. I came out and he was like, how do you feel? And I was just like, good. And was probably really awkward and just didn't know what to do and ran off.
And they're videoing every moment.
Oh yeah, every
right?
moment. Yeah.
What's that like, just to constantly have the camera on you?
It's kind of weird, but I mean, I was excited. It's exciting, and I think too there was elements of them trying to kind of twist, like, what's your story, and like what makes you interesting.
Did you come with it? I'm sure you're coached to come with the story.
Yeah. Definitely. I kind of was like, oh, I quit volleyball to do music, which is just like, how can we spice it up? Like, I feel like they were just like, has anyone died in your family? Like,
or a death somewhere,
what's something bad that's happened in your life? So there was definitely quite a bit of like, how do we make you more interesting? And at the time, it wasn't so much an artist show as it was just a singing show. Now it's much more like artist centered, I think, and like there's more original music, but at the time it was very much just like more about being a singer. And so for me, like I would say I'm a songwriter before I'm even a singer. And so that the deal I was offered was so much more exciting because it was all about writing songs and being an artist. And American Idol at the time was like being a singer and trying to pull some story out of my ass that like wasn't true. And so I was just kind of like, okay, this clearly is the better move because it just felt more me,
Do you feel like you did a good job in your, like, were you nervous?
No, I killed it. I feel like I did a good job. Yeah.
It's fun, right, Samantha? To hear this?
I'm thinking back to when I auditioned for the X Factor in London, didn't get past the first round, did not kill it.
Oh, their loss.
Yeah, their loss. Totally.
But like, why weren't you super nervous, and why weren't you like, you know?
I mean, at that point, like I was 17. I've been performing since I was 13. So for for my whole life, like I'd performed, I'd sang for people, and I think the adrenaline also kicked in, and you kind of feel like, you know, they really kind of beef it up for you, like this is your one shot, and like, you know, like cue Eminem, like they really kind of, there's a lot of energy and adrenaline, and so I think that I just kind of tapped into that and just tried to have fun. And also my vocal coach Dean was like, he's like, just have fun. Like I had a lot of good support, I think, for it too. And so I just thought, you know, I'm just gonna wing it and no looking back, you know.
I have a question, because it sounds like you got a lot of good validation from your community as you were becoming an artist. Did you ever, as a teenager, deal with not that, you know, like feeling judged or insecure about your creativity?
I definitely had friends that I think I had some issues with girlfriends, I think, just because people knew me for something and I stood out in a way. And so I would have girls just not like me or just be really mean to me, or kind of, if I showed up at like a party or a hang, people would kind of be upset I was there because they felt like I was going to take the attention or something. And I don't feel like my personality is like, do you think my personality is like intense and like, like everyone look at me? Like I'm not that way.
You're very down to earth.
And so anyways, I would have moments where I had some issues with friendships throughout the years. And so I started to feel like I needed to kind of dumb myself down, or like not be as excited about things that were happening for me, because I didn't want my friends to feel bad, or to feel like, oh, well, Ellie's just so cool doing all these things. And, you know, because I had friends that would like kind of knock at me or kind of say things like, and when I moved to Nashville, I had friends that were just kind of like, okay, well, whatever, you're too good for us now. And I'm just like, I never have thought that or acted that way, but it was just this weird, I don't know if it's like just jealousy or what, but it sucked. And it definitely, I had some like deep insecurities of almost like, don't shine too bright because you're gonna like make other people not like you if you do that.
Yeah. That's definitely aligns with my experience being a teenage girl. There's so much like envy and
it's rough. It's really rough. Yeah.
And then you go to American Idol, you kill it, you get the golden ticket, and what does that mean exactly?
You go to Hollywood.
The golden ticket means
you're going to Hollywood. You're going to the next round.
You're going to be on the show, right?
Yeah.
Or not?
Yeah, you're going to be on the show.
Like in the final, like they start out with a certain number, right?
Yeah, I think it's like the first, you know, I think it's like 50 or more people that make it, and then you get in the teams and you do all the crazy stuff in Hollywood. So they were like trying to book my ticket for September something to fly out there and do the next
And what
round.
year was this?
This was 2014 or 15.
Okay.
I think, or 2013 or 2014. Yeah.
So and I just have to ask this because we don't always get people who, you know, audition for American Idol on MormonStories. So there's probably tens of thousands of people who this would be their dream just to get an audition.
Yeah.
And then like, it would be outside of their realm of possibility that they would get the golden ticket. And you did both. You both auditioned and you got the golden ticket. And then you turned it down. Like, was that hard?
Yeah, it was way hard. I did not know what to do. It was just weird timing, because I didn't think I was going to make it, because I don't feel like I'm this Kelly Clarkson singer with just this huge voice. Like, my power is my songwriting, and I wasn't able to show that. And so I was like, I have a good voice, but I'm not Kelly Clarkson. I'm not Carrie Underwood. So I truly didn't think I would make it. And even Dean Kalin, my vocal coach, like the thing we were always trying to work on was me singing more powerfully and singing, you know, bigger notes and longer notes because that was kind of my weakness as a singer. And so I'm just like, oh, they're not going to want me on the show because A, I'm not some powerhouse vocalist, and B, I don't have some crazy story. So it was, I mean, I didn't expect it, honestly. And then I didn't expect to get an offer to be signed. So it kind of just like, I was just plugging myself in wherever I could to try to like give myself the opportunity to succeed somewhere. And I think because I just relentlessly was like throwing myself into all this stuff, like it just, I don't know, call it partial luck and maybe just a good day. Like, who knows, if I would have sang a different song, I wouldn't have made it, you know, but it was tough. Like I probably spent 3 months just like so conflicted. Like, do I do American Idol? What if I win? What if I could sing original music? What if I did an original song and it blew up and then that changed my life? But what if I let go of this? And then like it was a total really hard couple months. And also, obviously that's kind of a good problem to have, but at the time it was like that was my life and that was like the situation. And I remember making the phone call to the producer and I just had this pit in my stomach. Like I knew it was the right thing to do, but I also just felt bad because I knew that so many people would have given anything to have that ticket. And I literally said to them on the phone, I was like, can you guys like please give this to somebody else that, you know, you didn't have enough tickets left, but still, you know, would have had a shot, you know? And so, yeah, I hope they did. I don't know if they ever did, but I hope they did.
So I guess all I can say just about the American Idol thing is like, I can see on the one hand, you making a very logical, rational decision that's maybe best for your career and your ultimate ambitions. But there's this idea of like getting a break and like seizing it when you get the break. And like, I could imagine myself, if I got a break, I'd be like, there's no way I'm turning anything down because you never know if you're going to get another one. And this is one of the breaks in modern pop culture. So like, I could just see myself, number one, being super tormented if I had other ambitions, but number two, being unable to resist the shot, wondering if I would then pass it up and then never get the shot again.
Yeah.
And I'm projecting all that on you, but that's, do you relate to that, Samantha?
Well, I was just going to say, it's not like, I mean, it was like already clear that you had another break that was kind of there. It's not like you were just giving up for nothing, right?
Because you'd already got the record
Like you were
offer.
blossoming.
Yeah, I'd already gotten that offer.
Okay,
and I think the reason why the offer was so, you know, it was Taylor Swift's label. And so I was, obviously, she was like my icon, idol, all the things at the time. And so, yeah, for me to give that up almost felt like more of a loss than this chance that maybe I could win American Idol, but then there's, you know, 50 plus other people, probably way better singers than me, that I would not have beaten, honestly. So, yeah.
Yeah, I guess I can also see like, well, it just sounds like you made a smart decision, but I could also see myself, and again, I'm projecting, but I could see myself wanting to not do it because I'd be afraid of what if I failed, right?
Yeah.
But it's not like that wasn't you either. But,
No, yeah.
So I'm just basically,
Because, I mean, you're going on American Idol hoping to get the result that was already like coming up to you.
The deal was prize was like a record deal, essentially. Yeah.
It's like when musicians do Eurovision. It's like you can't risk it for your career, you know. You've got to go with the very bad reference.
Well, I guess it speaks to a couple things. One, it speaks to you having a real clear sense of what you wanted to do and what you loved. And is it fair to say some confidence that you felt like you were going to make it, and so you didn't need to jump at the first chance?
Yeah, definitely. Yeah.
Well, that's kind of badass, right? Yeah. Okay, so what was that like to turn it down? And again, that means that out of J-Lo, Harry Connick Jr. and Keith Urban, that at least 2 out of the 3 wanted you? Like, that's pretty cool. So then to like say no, like, I don't know.
It's really funny because I wrote a song called Heart Condition that J-Lo actually cut. She was gonna release it. I don't know what's happening with it, but she cut it and they were saying it was gonna be the album track or the single track of her album. This was like, 3 or 4 years ago or 3 years ago.
It was less than that, yeah.
3.5 years ago. So I have a song that has her voice on it, and it's a song I wrote. And so it's just funny because she said no for me being on the show, and then she cuts a song that I wrote.
Did you get to hear her cut of your song?
Yeah, I have it in my email. Yeah.
How cool is that?
Crazy. So it was like a full circle moment where I was like, hey.
I love it. Not everyone gets to say that J-Lo sang a song they wrote.
Yeah, pretty insane. I'm still pinching myself. She's like my girl crush forever.
And this is not, I didn't know any of this stuff when I brought you on, so this is just fun to learn.
I know, I'm enjoying you being like, what?
You're like, why did you even interview me? You don't know anything about me. I'm like, well.
You were talking about the hook and like American Idol, and I was like, American Idol's not the hook. Ellee Duke is the hook. Forget American Idol. It's one tiny face.
Yeah, we knew her when, Samantha. We knew her when, yeah.
Oh my God.
I've thought about that. I'm like, I'm going to look back on this interview in like 3 years and be like, yeah.
When you're an international sensation. Yeah. You kind of already are. Anyway, so, okay, so you got the record deal before you said no to American Idol. Is that right?
I got the offer. Yeah.
The offer. Mm-hmm. And is there anything you want to say about what it's like to get an offer? Like, and also, sorry, I have to ask this question too. Like, you hear about Celine Dion and the guy that was her manager, she ends up marrying him. And then you hear about like Alanis Morissette and whoever it was that she did her album with, she ends up singing about that abuse. And so I guess I'm wondering, like, so this guy that you mentioned that you were kind of working with in Nashville, if I'm your parent, I'm thinking there's wolves out there. I'm not going to want my daughter around these men. Some are going to want to take advantage. Some are going to have ill intentions. And of course, I don't want you to share anything you're not comfortable sharing, but like, would it be legitimate for a parent to be worried about that? And what was it like to be navigating this person that you wanted to trust, who seemed to really want to make you successful, but then you never know what the intentions are or if things go sour? I think you know what I mean.
think the intention was kind of clear later on, which I can speak to later. But initially, I mean, Will is, he's a very good person. And like my mom was like with me because I mean, I'm 15, 16 years old. So my mom is on all these trips with me. She went to all the shows I played. Anytime I had like a session, like a songwriting session, she would either drop me off or she'd wait outside, or there'd usually be, if it was, there'd usually be 3 people. And so my parents were really like protective in the way that they vetted people enough, and we kind of got to know him together for long enough, went to dinner. And then also like I met this girl, Heather Morgan, who was signed to Sony, and she became a good friend of mine and she knew him. And so it was like, the more you kind of saw, oh, these people know this person and can kind of vet that like they're not a shark like maybe these people are, was super helpful. So it kind of just like the outside validation that started to come of like, yes, he's legit. He's like has a great reputation, and he doesn't do this a lot. He doesn't just like, he's not someone that's just going around trying to sign 15-year-old girls. Like he'd never done this for someone before until he met me. So, honestly, it's just a ton of work. Like I feel like sometimes people just hear, oh, you got signed. And it's like, I literally spent, 3.5 years making trips to Nashville. I played in dive bars. Like I played in just the most like kind of raunchy places in Nashville, like literally.
Underaged?
Yeah. I mean, if I had my mom with me, I could, but like not like strip clubs or anything like that, but just like,
bars.
Just bars. Yeah. And there's like just, all these like crazy people just like partying, having a good time. And I would sing, I would just get up and sing like 4 songs, and like me and my mom literally just cold calling venues and being like, can she perform? If I'm with her, well, how do we do it? Where do we come? Like my mom and I literally just like DIY'd this shit. Like we just called people. We were kind of just fearlessly like, what do we do? And calling, just like not really afraid to just kind of ask questions. And like to this day, I'm forever thankful to my mom for doing that, because she just like rallied around me as like a parent, just like, I believe in my kid, and like I have your back. And she was just like there every step of the way for that, you know? And
how was that in your relationship with her? Like, was it grueling? Was it fun? Like you hear about, like when I interviewed Wayne Sermon of Imagine Dragons.
Yeah, I
and
love
they talk
him.
about just, you've met Wayne?
Yeah, I've worked with Wayne. Yeah,
oh, okay.
Love him.
Great guy, right?
Fabulous, yeah.
And he just talks about like schlepping around Vegas casinos for years.
Yeah.
Playing crap gigs.
Oh, yeah.
Like, is it fun or is it grueling or
it's
is it
grueling it's just like I played some gigs like in just really like, you know, kind of the middle of nowhere in California, in Utah. Even when I went on tour with Leanne Rimes, it was amazing. And that was like such an incredible opportunity. And those shows were great because I'm an opener and like she already has this built-in audience. But when you're like trying to build your audience as an artist that like isn't just like nationally, globally known, like there was times where I would play shows and, you know, people in the audience that were drunk, if I was telling a story about a song, they'd be like, just get on with it. And like people would kind of heckle you. And there was like creepy guys that would try to talk to me or give me their card, or people would try to scout me for like weird modeling things. And like there's just gnarly people everywhere just trying to like take advantage of you at every moment. So the fact that I had my mom to like buffer that, and then Will as well, who kind of became my mentor, like, you know, I just kind of found a couple people that could kind of help protect me from getting in like a bad situation. But it's tough and it's hard, and you have to like really want it, you know, like you have to want to be a musician more than anything, to like get through all of the stuff and like the paying your dues. Because that was one thing in Nashville when I first showed up there. It's like, even if you have all this raw talent, there's also this gatekeeping of like, well, you need to prove that you're worth our time. You need to show us why we should pay attention to you. You need to come back in when you have this all tied up in a bow for us. Like there's a lot of kind of like, prove to us your worth and then we'll give you the time of day. And so I was kind of just, I was rejected a lot. There was so many meetings that I took where people were just like, you're too young, you're not ready, your voice isn't fully developed enough, your songwriting needs work. Like I got rejected for years by people. I met with so many other people before Big Machine that were just like, nah, not into it. But I just kept going. And I basically just told my parents, I was like, I'm not going to college. So if y'all were gonna help me out in any way with that, like, can we just try to get my music, like somehow me in some situation where I can do this for a living, you know? And so my parents were all stars and they're just like, okay, let's figure it out, you know? And I'm super blessed in that extent of it, for sure.
And how did your mom balance being a mom to two other kids when she's giving you so much attention?
Yeah.
I'm not asking you to spill tea on your family dynamic.
Yeah, no, it was hard. Like, and it's not like we were gone for like months at a time, but like she, you know, she'd come out, we'd go to Nashville for a week. And so we'd be gone for a week. So it wasn't like anything super crazy. And we, you know, we'd go out there every couple months for a week. Okay. And at that time, you know, my little brother he's like 13, 14. And then my older brother, I think, was either about to go on a mission or on a mission at that point. And so it was doable for our situation. But yeah, I think it was hard because like I did get a lot of time with my mom that like my other siblings weren't getting necessarily. But there really wasn't, just to be honest, like there really wasn't any huge issue with it. And my brothers have always been really supportive of me too. And so I think they were just like, oh, this is, yeah, just like, dope, do your thing, you know, get it, girl. Yeah.
And were there, like, I'm thinking back to the Beatles and their years in Germany where they're just playing for years.
Yeah.
And were there times you wanted to quit and just give it? And if so, what was that like? And how did you just say, I'm not going to quit? Like, how do you develop, like, I'm thinking of sales, right? And how hard it could be to sell and you just want to quit. Like, how do you gather the fortitude to keep going when you want to quit? You're discouraged.
At that time, I think because my why was so ingrained in the church and this like mission to like, you know, I have to push through all this stuff because I have to show God, that I'm going to work hard enough to deserve it. And I also have to prove that I'm going to stay, you know, because I had like, when I moved to Nashville, I had so many opportunities to like to drink or to have sex with someone or hook up with someone or whatever. And I never did, because in my mind, I'm thinking, if I do this, like, God is not going to bless me to have this whole career. And it was like I was trying to do a trade. It was like, if I'm worthy and I do all the things you want me to, then you're going to give me my dream and I'll be this example for you and we'll just be this team, God, like, let's go. And so that was a big part of, I think, what kept me fighting so hard. Was just because it was rooted in this thing that was so much bigger than myself, you know? So in that way, I'm very thankful for that, you know?
So the Mormonism was helpful in that regard.
Yeah, for a time.
And if there was a pie chart of like how much of it was you having just ambitions to be a star and how much of it was, you know, to glory be to God and to the church, what was the pie chart?
I worked my ass off. Yeah, so well, I do believe I was given a gift, but I also know the work that I put in, and I know the work that my parents and time that they put in, and just like how much I pushed and pushed and pushed myself and put myself in so many situations to be rejected, to not get the deal, to then finally get the thing that I was like working for all those years, like basically my entire life, you know?
Yeah.
So.
But, and what percentage of that was you wanting to glorify the church and God versus you just being ambitious and wanting?
I don't know if I could put a percentage. I mean, I think
half, like.
I think that genuinely I was just scared if it wasn't rooted in that, then it wouldn't work.
Okay.
And so I think that
your secret sauce. He was like your secret weapon. God was your secret weapon.
I had that kind of chip of like, well, I have all these answers of like life and afterlife and all these things and the point of everything and the purpose of everything. And so I kind of just felt like I'm special because of that. And because of that, it's all going to go the way I want it to. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So it gave you confidence.
Yeah. Big time.
So far, we're up to what, age 18? And Mormonism is just an unambiguous good in your life, basically. Yep. Yeah?
Yeah.
And tons of positive things are happening. And your parents are LDS, and so they are committed to their kids, and they're focused on their family. And so, like, just good. Mormonism, this is like one of those Mormon stories where, like, how could anything go wrong?
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Dun, dun, dun. Just you wait.
Okay, one last quick question. You hear about singer-songwriters writing a lot of songs before they ever even have their first album.
Yeah.
Do you have a sense for how many songs you wrote by the age of 18?
Probably
did you
like
write a lot?
Well over 400.
What?
Yeah, like
400?
300 to 400 probably. I mean, I've been writing songs since I was 5. So if you count that, I mean, that's like 13 years of songs, you know?
And would you record each one? Would you write down each one?
I would write them in notebooks. I'd write out all the lyrics. And man, I'm trying to remember how I would record them because I didn't have a phone till I was like 15. And I couldn't record. I don't think I could record anything on it. So I think I would.
With camcorders?
Yeah, camcorder.
Yeah.
Yeah, my parents had a camcorder, so I would record. I would record some of the songs on that, and otherwise I'd just kind of write like which chords I was playing, and which capo or which fret I had capoed on the guitar, what key it was in, and then I would just kind of try to remember it whenever I came back to it, and I usually could. Yeah.
You have a good gift for that too. Remembering stuff you write.
Yeah, it's weird.
Yeah,
I don't know.
it's cool.
Thank you.
And most of your songs were like teenage love. What were they about?
I had a song called Tippy Toes that was like about like falling for someone and you're like right there about to fall for them. I wrote a lot about relationships. I wrote this song called June, about the month of June, because that was like my favorite month. So I wrote a song about it. I wrote a song about my dog. I had a dog named Jack that I wrote a song about. Like, I think I was trying to like morph it with like Titanic and like Jack like on Titanic. And it was like these really like kind of indie like chords, and oh my gosh, I wish, I probably still have it somewhere, but it was very dramatic. Like I was like just all the like feelings and emotions at such a young age where you're just like, angsty. How are you feeling all these things? Like what is going on with you? Yeah.
In the spirit of Taylor Swift, what about boyfriends you broke up with that you're going to burn down?
Oh yeah, I definitely did like the petty, I'm going to post the breakup song on my Instagram and I know they're going to see it for sure.
You did that?
Oh yeah.
Okay.
I actually sent a couple songs I wrote to different guys that had like we'd broken up and they were annoying or whatever. And I just like sent them a song like, this is the summary. You know, it's so ridiculous.
I love it.
Yeah.
I love it. Okay, so like at your heart, you're a you're a songwriter first, before singer. Is that fair to say?
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. All right. Mm-hmm. Okay. Well, I think it's probably time to jump to Auz and hear a little bit of Auz's story.
Sure.
But Samantha, anything else you want to ask before we jump to Auz?
No.
Okay. All right. Okay. Well, Auz, you've been waiting patiently.
Yes.
We hit kind of her adult years. So let's just jump back in the time machine.
Cool.
You're actually older than Ellie.
Yeah.
So when we go back, we're going to be going back even maybe to a little bit earlier than where her story started. So what do you want to say about your Mormon story?
Oh yeah. So, my dad's side, we, go all the way back to the pioneers, have a long history with the LDS faith. My mom's side, my grandparents converted when my grandma was pregnant with my mom. And they were living in Northern California and they converted and then lived their whole lives as part of the church, right? All my mom's siblings and everything. I'm an only child. I was born in Los Angeles in January 91.
Kim Kardashian's.
Oh, yeah.
What's it called?
The person who helps you.
Doula?
Doula.
Or like midwife? Or?
Yeah.
Something like that.
Kardashian's midwife.
The man who helped my mom with the whole process of birth. I don't know what that's called, but.
OBGYN? Like
Yep.
Wait, delivered you?
Yeah.
As well?
Yeah.
Damn.
Yeah, so.
Because your parents were in the LA area by then?
Yeah, so just to give you a little bit of background on them, because I think it ties in to a lot of, I guess, my story. My grandfather was the vice president of A&R at Capitol Records for a really long time. He actually signed the Beach Boys and...
What?
Yeah.
Carl Engemann,
shout out.
OG.
Yeah. So
For which label again?
Capitol Records.
Oh, wait, was he friends with Lex D'Azevedo? Like,
oh, yeah.
Way back in the day?
Yeah, so they started the Saturday's Warrior.
So I've interviewed Lex D'Azevedo for MormonStories. And
you're kidding.
He talks about, this is your grandpa?
Yep.
He was a big deal.
He kind of was.
And the King Singers, which is Lex's mom.
Yep.
Is it the King?
The King sisters.
Sisters.
Yep.
They were Mormon.
Yep.
Talk about more Mormon celebrity singers.
Yeah.
So that's your grandpa. Ooh.
Yeah.
And that's Hollywood kind of LA or what part of LA?
Yeah, so they lived in Studio City.
Yeah.
Big in just huge in the Mormon community out there. So my father grew up in Studio City, California. And yeah, my grandpa was doing the music thing. All of my dad and a lot of his siblings, were involved in music. Growing up, they would sing on, kids tracks with bigger singers and stuff. And just fully involved in kind of the creative, artistic world out there, the music business. And then my grandfather actually, it's funny you brought up the Osmonds because he was also Marie's manager for 30 years. So that's what originally brought my grandfather and the family out to Utah. They moved to Provo, as far as I remember, specifically to be around Marie and to help with the career and everything. So
your grandpa managed the Osmonds?
He managed Marie.
Marie?
Yep.
For 30 years?
30 years.
That's big time. I mean, that's big time. That's cool.
Yeah.
Okay.
So, Yeah, and so they moved to Provo, kind of like OG Provo, like basically when it was just nothing out there, right? Like it wasn't developed. It was just like a bunch of farm fields and everything. And, you know, they've been here ever since. So, and then as far as my mom goes, my father, his career was in the music industry. So he was like, he was a artist. He was the lead singer of a few different bands and stuff in the 80s. And he sang the theme song for Scarface, the movie, and like my dad. Yeah.
His dad. Yeah.
Yeah. So he was just like fully like
Scarface. That's Al Pacino.
Yeah.
That's awesome. Yeah, what kind of song? I don't know the theme song for Scarface.
It's Push It to the Limit.
It's called Push It to the Limit.
You've heard it.
Rick Ross even did like a remix of it called Push It. Like it's just, and my dad's voice is on the Rick Ross song. It's super funny.
Wait, Push It. No.
Yeah. It's Push It, and then his like my dad's vocals in the background saying Push It to the limit. So it's just so funny.
So what types of bands was your dad in? Like,
it was like rock, like rock bands, like kind of pop rock. Yeah.
In the 80s.
Yep.
But any names of the bands that you remember?
Yeah. So one was called Device, and one was called Animotion.
Animotion.
Yep.
I think I've heard of Animotion. Could I have heard of Animotion?
You could have. Yeah. I think. There's some movie called like. I can't remember the name of it, but yeah, they're pretty successful, and he had a whole career doing that. And so
your dad.
My dad. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
And is he Mormoning the whole time?
Mormoning the whole time.
Yeah.
Yep. So.
I have to Google like Animotion. What song did I know from them?
Yeah. I wish I could remember the name of the song that was in that movie, but the name of the movie, but
Obsession. Is
Yeah.
that You're My Obsession?
Probably. Yeah.
But isn't that a woman who sings that?
So he was co-singer. So it was a man and a woman as well. So.
What do you want me to be to make you sleep with me? You're my. Is that the song?
I honestly. You don't even know. I can't remember that one.
So this is the soundtrack to my high school. And
there you go.
Don't even know what song
it is. It was before I was born.
Whoa.
So.
No shame. I'm just totally joking.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. So that's your dad trying to make it as a rock pop artist in the 80s?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So, and then as far as my mom goes, so my mom grew up
doing that from Provo?
So he was in Studio City, and then he went on a mission to Peru. And while he was on his mission, that's when my grandpa and grandma moved to Utah.
Okay.
So he came back. He left from Studio City and came back to Provo, which was a big change for him.
So he would have gone to high school in the LA area.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, he did.
Okay.
So.
Got it. Okay. So your dad served a mission.
He did. Yeah, Peru. Yep. Okay. In the jungle, just roughing it. So he lost like 50 pounds on his mission.
So your dad's Paul.
Paul. Yep, that's my dad.
Okay, so I'm reading the Wikipedia entry for Animotion, and sure it is Paul Engemann right there.
So you heard the songs?
Yeah, at least a couple.
Yeah, it's so funny. Yeah. So.
Okay.
And then, so as far as my mom goes, and this all ties directly into like, my story and my upbringing and everything and how my parents raised me. But my mom grew up in Northern California, like super, super far northern, a place called Eureka, California. And kind of from, very humble beginnings. My grandfather on my mom's side worked in, they owned like a butcher shop. And when my mom was 18 or just under 18, she moved to New York and became a model and an actress, and lived in New York, back and forth between New York and LA for like 20 years. And so, both of them just, were very, I guess, involved in like those industries, right? And so they didn't have, I guess, like your standard like Mormon upbringing in like Utah or Idaho or something, right? They kind of traveled a lot, and they
didn't live here for like most of their lives.
Yeah. So, and then my mother actually ended up working with my dad's sisters who were in the movie industry, film and television. They like worked on I think a few TV shows together or like a movie or something. And so because of that, my mom met my dad. I think it was through them or like just through mutual friends, right? My mom was traveling somewhere and she ended up in Utah, and she went to one of my dad's shows at the Hill Air Force Base. And my dad is like 4.5 years younger than my mom. So when she saw him, it was just like, oh, he's just like some cute kid, but never like thought anything of it. But my dad was just like googly eyed all over my mom. And then they met up a few years. Oh, a crazy story actually is my grandpa, growing up, because my dad was a few years younger than my mom was already in her career when my dad was in high school. And she did a commercial called the Pearl Drops commercial. Do you remember that? Pearl Drops. It was like a teeth whitening.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Yeah. So my mom was like the face of that, and that commercial ran for years and years and years. But my dad and my grandpa saw that commercial on TV when my dad was in high school. And my grandpa he pointed at the girl and said, "Now, Paul, this is the type of woman you need to marry."
No.
Yeah. And then they ended up marrying. Like, it's just,
and she was
bizarre.
LDS.
Yeah.
And you didn't know it.
No.
That's the Holy Ghost.
So
Right?
just based
How do you
on
argue
the
with the Holy
commercial.
Ghost?
Right?
What's that, Smith?
No, I was saying, so we didn't know anything about her when he said this is the type of girl you marry.
No.
She's like,
Just
this
some random
gorgeous
girl.
woman.
Yeah.
Amazing.
Church is true. I'm going back. Right? Okay, you're back.
Yeah.
Samantha, you going back?
John, you make that joke every episode.
So yeah, then, crazy. They just ended up getting married, and they are living in Los Angeles and
LA Temple?
Los Angeles Temple. Yep.
That's an LA Temple marriage.
Yep.
With like movie star, celebrity, artist people.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah. Just out there
glitzy.
living their dreams.
and I'm sure the Osmonds and like all the stars are at the wedding
Yep.
or the reception.
100%.
And you weren't born yet, so
Not yet.
Yeah.
No.
Okay.
So yeah, from there, they're in California. My dad is, doing the music thing. My mom's doing the acting and modeling thing.
What's your mom's name?
Suzanne Barnes Engemann.
Okay.
Yeah. And then, long story short, my dad had kind of like a really big music kind of deal fall through last minute, where some people just kind of were dishonest about some things, and it was just kind of like a rough time. And so they ended up moving into Utah to live with my grandparents for a while. And I was actually born in California, and then they moved to Utah when I was like 2, and we lived with my grandparents for a few years, and then moved into a house in the River Bottoms in Provo when I was 7. So.
And that's a nice place to live in Provo, right?
Yeah.
River Bottoms?
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. So I honestly just had like a beautiful upbringing. Like, I was an only child, so I didn't grow up with siblings. So I was always just very close to my parents. Still am. Like, just have always had a really great relationship with them. It was just like us, and I looked up to them a lot. And just had like, so I guess going forward from here, like, I didn't have, what's normal, right? Like, who says what normal is? That's relative. But I guess in my mind, like, I didn't have the normal, like, Mormon upbringing. Like, my parents were a little bit more
Chill.
Yeah, just chill, more like liberal-minded, I guess, just more like open-minded about things, not as like strict with the church, more like spirit of the law versus letter of the law, right? So, they had strong testimonies though, and I grew up with a very strong testimony of the church. We'd go to, church every Sunday, but like, on the other side of, like, we would still like go out to eat on Sundays, and it just wasn't as like following the rules. Yeah, like, it was vastly different.
Very different.
Very different.
Yeah, so more liberal, believing but liberal, relaxed Mormonism versus a more strict Orthodox Mormon.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yep.
Okay.
So yeah, just like my whole life, I had a happy childhood. Everything was great. I always wanted to be baptized, wanted to go on a mission, wanted to be married in the temple.
Let me ask, did your parents stay in the entertainment modeling kind of industries while you were growing up, or did they branch out in other things?
Yeah, so when I was a young child, my mom was still a working actress, so she would travel to New York or LA for jobs, commercial jobs or movie or TV jobs.
So your mom's got an IMDb sort of thing, and you can see her credits and
definitely,
stuff?
Yeah.
Fun.
And even in the Utah community, like, she was very involved with a lot of the kind of Mormon film and television people out here as well. So
I'm geeking out, like, I'm what movies or TV shows or whatever.
Yeah, my mom was on like Who's the Boss? She was on Knight Rider. She was on Yeah, just like really well established in like the commercial world as well. Yeah, so that's just what she did for a long time. Yeah, so.
Okay, so your mom is a successful actress / model. What was your dad doing?
Yeah, so during that time, you know, after his like the big kind of music deal fell through that was literally supposed to be like millions of dollars, it was just a big hit like to them and the way that they saw their life going, and they had to move to Utah, and that was just a big shift for them, right? So in the ward that we were going to in Provo, as like a little baby that I was, there was this couple in the ward who they became friends with, and they would come over to our house and they'd say, "Oh, we love the way that you've decorated your house. Like, will you decorate ours?" And so they decided to do it, and they just kind of fell into interior design. So for a long time, both my parents together had an interior design firm that they worked at and were super, super successful at for years and years and years and years. In all over the U.S., they would do interior design.
For kind of high-end clients?
Yeah. I mean, probably the biggest, they were on the cover of Architectural Digest because they did Larry King's house, who is actually my uncle. So, yeah.
I was just waiting for that.
Yeah. So it's just a weird, like, crazy
So
thing.
Larry King, one of his late wives.
Yeah, so his most recent wife, who he
Sean.
was with for over 20 years, is my aunt, my dad's sister.
That's cool.
Yeah. So
We actually got engaged in their backyard.
in their backyard in Los Angeles. Yeah.
in Provo?
In Los Angeles. Yeah.
So
In
Larry
Beverly
King
Hills.
and Shauna had a home in Beverly. Sean.
Yeah.
Beverly
Beverly
Hills
Hills.
and Utah as
Yeah.
well. Yeah. So
So Larry King was a huge inspiration for me. Like,
Really?
what would make me do 17 years of like interviewing people?
yeah.
Whoa.
I grew up watching Larry King interview people.
No way.
And he was a really important influence. And I hate to say Charlie Rose because he got Me Too'd, but Charlie Rose was
Sure.
another influencer. But Larry King was, even Rush Limbaugh. But anyway.
Yeah.
Anyway, Larry King is a legend.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
So he was married to your dad's sister?
Yep.
That's cool.
Yeah.
He just passed away like a couple years ago, right?
Yeah, less than, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So, yeah, something like that.
Rest in peace, Larry.
Yeah,
Yeah.
definitely. So,
Okay, so interior design, your parents got into that and doing really high-end things. So you
Yeah.
said Larry King's house, like...
So the interior design work that they did for my Uncle Larry was on the cover of Architectural Digest. Yeah. So that was a big thing for them, and that, you know, obviously gave them a lot of credibility. Yeah. So they did that for a really, really long time. Yeah.
And that's a bit of a switch going from entertainment to design, but I mean, they were successful and meeting cool people and making a good living. So, I mean,
They have amazing fashion. Like they're so like,
Styling?
how do you explain
They're just
them?
very artistic and they just have good taste and good, I don't
They
know.
like color coordinate all the time, and it's just so impressive. The outfits they put together, and they're so cute. Yeah.
So
They're just cool people.
okay. Okay, so I imagine they're gone a lot? Like, are you raised by nannies? Like,
no, so I mean, they weren't necessarily gone a lot. I mean, a lot of the work that they were doing was in Utah, but they always worked for themselves, right? So I actually got to spend a lot of time with them because their schedule was just so flexible and they were fully autonomous, right? So they just had full control over what they were doing, and they would just take projects on when they came around, or So yeah, we spent a lot of time together growing up. Yeah.
okay, so what was the Mormon aspect other than just being more relaxed?
Yeah.
How, I guess Ellie had said that like Mormonism defined everything, like it meant
Like our
everything.
world revolved
Yeah.
around. Yeah.
Was it fair to say that your world also revolved around Mormonism, even though you were jet setting with the stars?
Yeah, I mean, I think it was definitely a very core, big part of our lives and of my life. But it was just more, I don't know, like open-minded, I guess. Like my parents also traveled a lot throughout their lives, and like me growing up, we traveled a ton. So I got to just like culturally see a lot of different types of people, how different people live, different religions. Like, so I feel very blessed and lucky in that sense that I was able to experience that at such a young age and just see so many different types of people and how they live their life. And I think that also influenced just how I see the world and that, it's very easy to be in a bubble here in Utah, right? It's just like, this is all you know. This is the whole culture of how everyone lives. So I think that contributed just to like me having a little bit more like laxed view about the church and like not as, don't get me wrong, I still had my things where I, wanted to do the right thing and wanted to feel like I was close to God and like living the commandments and stuff. But if I'd mess up, my parents were very like, we just had a very open relationship, and they were very open with me, and communication was just a very, very important aspect of our lives. And so I always felt like I could talk to them about things and stuff like that.
So tell me if I'm reading this right. So like in your teen years, whereas Ellee was like, I'm the law of chastity, I'm not even gonna let a boy touch me, I'm gonna be, like super strict. It sounds like in your family, like, they were teaching you to live the commandments and to be righteous, but there wasn't this level of strictness, and that you probably weren't as like worried about making a mistake as Ellee would have been.
Yeah.
Is that right?
I mean, when we compare it to her, like, absolutely. I mean, I still dealt with that, right? That's just kind of a big part of the church is like, if you mess up and you got to repent and do all these things. But I think my parents just taught me more that like, it's okay if that happens, and you're still loved and God still loves you, and it's not like your life's not over. And it was less fear-based, I guess.
You're not chewed gum or licked cupcake, basically.
100.
You didn't believe that you would have been.
No.
Oh.
No, not at all. Not at all.
And did that work for you?
Yeah. I mean, I still had moments, obviously, where when I'd mess up and I would be super hard on myself. And especially like being an only child, I think there was a lot of just like pressure, I guess, on me. Like, I'm the only kid, and like all of my parents' attention was on me, and like I looked up to them, and they were these very successful, like cool, interesting people, and so I wanted to be like that, and so I was very hard on myself too, in like some senses, I don't know.
Was there like, I'm sure there's a ton of people that know the names. The Engemann name, I'm sure if you go to like prominent Mormons or even church leaders, it's like, well, this is an important family connected to the Osmonds. Like, did you feel a pressure to live up to the name, that sort of thing?
That's a really good question. And yes, I did, for sure. And you're right. Like the Engemann name, like particularly in Provo, it's like a lot of people just knew who we were, right? My uncle even was like the quarterback of BYU, Brett Engemann for a while. My other uncle was quarterback up at the U.
Was he an Engemann too?
Yeah, Ryan Engemann. Yeah, so it's like the name is just kind of known, and it's like, so I felt pressure that I had to kind of be something important or big, I think, too. And that's kind of been a trip.
Yeah.
Even recently, so
yeah. Well, I mean, that raises the stakes of an interview like this, right? But
what's that?
I mean, that kind of raises the stakes of an interview like this. Yeah. Okay. So do you want to talk about your high school years?
Yeah,
like,
absolutely.
And let's talk about you. Like, what you can tell us your favorite primary songs, or like, did your family do scripture study or family evening, or did they kind of not? And and let's go into your adolescent years too.
Sure. Yeah. So growing up as like a child, we weren't like super consistent with like family home evenings or scripture study or things like that. We would kind of do it in phases. Like, I think my parents would be motivated at certain times to like just feel like that was something important that we needed to do, and then we would just kind of like fizzle out and like not do it as much. But like regardless of any of that, like we always just had a great relationship and felt close as a family and like loved each other a lot. And so I don't think that was anything that like we just didn't really like care about that stuff. You know what I mean? But we'd pray together and like, don't get me wrong, like the church was a big part of our lives for sure. And like, it was a really big part of my life too. But then like I was so growing up and getting into like my teenage years, I was always, man, how do I explain it? So I was kind of always the kid who, like, in my mind, I was like, oh, I'm never gonna, like, I had super strong testimony. I always just wanted to be, like, diligent in the church and, like, go on a mission. And, like I said, get married in the temple and all these things. And in my early high school days, I struggled with, like, some depression and, like, was, like, in therapy and, like, was put on some antidepressants and things like that. I think I was just kind of, like, overly angsty. I don't really know, like, where that came from or what it was, but I think I always wanted to be, like, different, and I always wanted to be, like, an individual, right? And I think also growing up as, like, an only child, I spent a lot of time by myself. And so I'd be in my head a lot, and I'd think a lot, and I'd think about life, and I'd think about God, and, like, just, like, the existential questions of life. And I think I thought about those things as, like, a young child. I also spent a lot of time with grown-ups as a child, right? So I'd have conversations with, like, these kind of older people who were more mature and more just, like, versed in, like, the world and how it works. And so that was just, like, a big part of who I was. Like, I was always very, like, deep, I guess, right? And so I think part of, like, that depth, like, maybe contributed to, like, some of the depression and just, like, I don't know, I don't think I was necessarily any different than anyone else. Like, I think when you're a teenager and you're kind of, like, trying to figure out your life and you're going through puberty, it's just a lot, you know? And so, like, a kind of a big part of my whole story is I was always the kid who, like, never said I was going to do drugs. You know, that was always just like, oh my gosh, like, are you kidding? Like, I'll never, ever do that. And then, like, I was in a group of friends, like, in high school, I feel stupid saying this, but, like, I was, like, popular and, like, I had a lot of friends.
What high school?
Timpview.
Okay.
Timpview High School. Yeah, I had a lot of friends and I was well liked, and I was friends with a lot of different people. Like, I was very, very non-judgmental. So I was friends with, you know, like, the stoners and the skaters and, like, the sports people and just everyone. Like, I was just friends with like, everyone, and I just loved people, and I loved just, like, learning about people, right? So I wasn't very, like, cliquey. I was always kind of the kid who, like, was just, you know, just friends with everyone. But, like, my core group of friends, like, kind of got into drugs and stuff, right? At least a portion of them. And so, you know, I would, like, worry about them and all these things. And
let me ask, like, don't, like, someone that looks at Utah Utah Mormonism from an idealistic, naive lens, is going to say Mormonism, teen Mormons and drugs, just those two things don't go together.
Yeah. Yep.
Would they be wrong?
No, not at all. Yeah, that's
and
definitely
in Provo,
true.
like Provo, these three things don't go together. Mormon, teens, and Provo.
Yeah.
Right?
Oh, yeah.
But they're wrong.
They're absolutely wrong. Yeah.
Tell us how that works.
Well, it's way more prevalent, I think, than people realize. And I think a lot of that comes from, like, the strong belief against it, because it causes kids, particularly me, to be curious. You know, it's like, we're not supposed to do these things, but then it's like, well, what's it all about? Like, why am I not supposed to do it? You know?
So the prohibition maybe even makes it more alluring or enticing?
Absolutely. Yeah. Absolutely. I think so.
Even in Provo?
Oh, yeah.
Especially, you're saying especially.
I mean, people are just people. Yeah. You know what I mean? Like, I think you'll find that anywhere.
Yeah.
So, but yeah, so it's like, it's this kind of, like, unknown kind of, like, uh-oh kind of thing that's like, oh, like, I'm not supposed to know about that. But then when your friends start doing it, it's like around you, you know? And so, like, this one night I went to, like I said, I was always that kid who was like, I'm never going to do it. And I went to IHOP with, like, one of my friends one night, like, super late, and it was just me and him, and he was explaining what, like, mushrooms was like, right? And I was just like, I want to do it. And the next day I did it. First thing I ever did was like these psychedelic mushrooms. And
now, this is before mushrooms have gotten super popular. So this would have been how many years ago?
So this was like 15, 16 years ago. I was like 15 or 16 years old.
How was that?
It was a trip, as they say, right? But
do you know how many grams you took?
I don't the first time. I don't.
But it was a big.
It was probably like 1.5 to 2
grams,
maybe. Yeah. But I can't say for sure, right? Yeah. But it definitely
took you somewhere.
Changed things, right? But anyway,
what do you mean change things? Like, was it life changing?
So I can get into that, but I specifically mean like it changed my reality, right? And that was something obviously that I'd never experienced and was just kind of like crazy, right? And so I did that a few times, and I kind of like got into like, cannabis, and it wasn't like a huge part of my life, but there were a few years there where I was just kind of doing things. I even got like caught by the police with marijuana, and me and a friend, and I had to like go to court for it and all these things. And it was like, I just never really saw my like life going that way prior to that. Right. And it's not like I was addicted or like anything like that, but I just had a bunch of friends who were just like messing around with it. And
it's a big deal here, I feel like, just because there is this stigma around drugs in general and this like fear. And so even more then than now, I feel like it's just like a really big deal to get caught.
Yeah. Oh, for sure. Yeah. My parents were not happy about that. So, anyway, so yeah, just like through my experiences in my like mid to later teenage years, I would do these psychedelics or these different things. And like, it was interesting because I found myself feeling, there were times where I like would feel very connected to God or like a higher power. And in my mind frame back then, it was God, right? It was God and Jesus. And I would feel like, how is it that I can do this and feel like more connected to God than even like prior times when I'm not doing this? And supposedly this is something that's bad. So it was just kind of weird, but it was very conflicting because I still had a very strong testimony of the church. And I knew like at face value, these things were things that I wasn't supposed to be doing. And so I think I had a lot of like internal conflict with that. But at the same time, I was very forgiving of myself just because I had been taught and raised that way, right? So I didn't think it was like something that was going to damn me to hell or like any of these things. It was just like, it wasn't the biggest deal, but I think it also caused just some stress in my life. And like a lot of times I'd be like thinking of my parents and like what they'd think of it, and it would just cause me to like get sad, and just like deep down I knew I shouldn't be doing it, but it was... And it's like looking back now, it's like, whatever, but just where my mindset was back then, it was something that I knew I shouldn't do. Right.
So you said a component of it was just peers doing that.
Yeah.
Fun exploration, even doing something a little bit dirty or naughty or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
Was some of it treating your depression, do you think? Or have you even thought about that? Like, because sometimes drug use is just treating depression.
Yeah.
When you don't go to a physician or a psychologist and you don't get SSRIs or whatever.
Yeah.
It's just like untreated.
Yeah.
Self-medicating some sort of anxiety or depression.
It could have been. Back then, I just saw it as like, I'm just having fun.
Okay.
But my parents, at times they'd like, when we'd have conflict about this, or like when I get caught, right? Specifically when I got caught with marijuana, because they didn't know anything up until then, but they would say like, why, like, what's so wrong with your life, or why, what have we done that's like caused you to do this? And in my mind, I was just like, it has nothing to do with that. Like, I'm just like having fun with my friends. But maybe subconsciously or maybe internally, there was something that I was dealing with, and that was something that I was like going to treat those things. I'm not really sure,
Well, it sounds like you were quite introspective from a young age and thinking about those existential questions. So I could see you being drawn to.
Yeah.
Did you stay within that like soft drug category, like psychedelics and weed?
If you want to share.
Yeah.
You don't have to say.
No. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, what do you consider a not soft drug?
I guess something that there's like more of a danger with.
Yeah, I never really got into anything.
You know, cocaine or anything like that.
Yeah, at that time, I had never really gotten into any of that. It was more just like weed and
shrooms.
You know, yeah.
And did you find it helpful? Like when you first did mushrooms, like did you have a positive experience?
The first time, honestly, I hardly remember it just because it was so just like kind of crazy. But then the next few times that I did it, it was very positive, and I felt connected to things, and I felt like I learned more about myself. But then I did have one experience that was horrible. I just had like a horrible trip, you know, and I just got like super sick and I threw up, and then I started to be like, I just got super in my head about like, I shouldn't be doing this, and like I'm a bad person, and like why am I doing this, and like I'm better than this, you know, and like that was kind of like a very gnarly experience, you know. But yeah, anyway, I don't really know where I was going or anything, but
so you would be experiencing some guilt for breaking the church's commandments, the word of wisdom, but also for causing your parents distress.
Absolutely.
And for not living up to the Engemann name, maybe.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Engemann?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, definitely.
And then do you have goals or like hobbies or pursuits parallel to this? What are you into? What do you know?
So I started playing guitar when I was like 13 or 14. My parents put me in lessons. I always grew up like not really knowing exactly what I wanted to do with my life. I still kind of struggle with that even like to this day. But yeah, I was just like generally like a pretty happy kid, pretty chill kid, like didn't have like a ton of worries, like things were taken care of in my life. My parents gave me a lot, maybe sometimes a little too much, you know? But I really didn't have like a lot of worries, or I was just kind of living my life, and I wasn't like super like goal oriented just because I didn't really like know what I wanted to do. And honestly, like I hate to say it and I feel kind of like dumb or like gross saying it, but just like things kind of like came easy to me, and like my teachers liked me a lot, and so like I could just kind of skate by, and yeah, I don't really know. But I always knew I wanted to go on a mission, right? So even like when I was experimenting with these things, like I knew at some point I needed to like stop doing it and clean up my act, so to say, right?
And by the way, that's a huge percentage of Mormon kids experiment with drugs or alcohol growing up, secretly feel guilty. Certainly my siblings, many of my siblings, all of my siblings did at one point or another. And I'm sure, you know, your story is very common.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. Mm-hmm. I guess. I don't know, but yeah. So anyway, going forward from there, you know, like.
Did you do seminary?
Yeah, seminary.
Were you into the doctrine and the theology and all that?
Like
as a literal believer?
Yeah, definitely.
One true church and all that?
Absolutely. Okay. Absolutely. I believed all the doctrine was like core part of my beliefs for sure. Yeah. And then, like graduating high school. Let
me ask you this really quick. What's Provo culture, Mormon culture like? Is there anything you want to say about that? Like, were you up on you were in the river bottoms, right? Mm-hmm. So there's going to be a lot of money and a lot of prominent Mormons. And Utah County and Provo is kind of special. We talked a little bit about Draper, but like it really, in Mormonism, it doesn't get more intense than Rexburg, Idaho, which Sam, we talked about in your interview a little bit, and freaking Provo, Utah. Like those are that's ground zero Mormon orthodoxy. There's a really great episode with Donna Showalter. She was a Relief Society president in Provo. Super intense kind of Mormonism. Was it like that? And Kara also was raised in Provo, Kara Burrell. And it was really interesting in Kara's interview because she talked about how she had liberal young women's leaders that we're not into like modesty weirdness, and we're not into shaming, but we're kind of intellectual progressives. And so I'm trying to get a sense for like the flavor of Mormon culture in your ward and stake and in your neighborhood. There's going to be affluence. There's going to be kind of notable names. And then there's going to be some flavor of like strictness or leniency. Can you color that picture for us a little bit?
Yeah, I think it's definitely like, I mean, Provo is where BYU is, and it's like, it's very like, I mean, at least in my mind, like when I think of Mormons or tell people that I'm Mormon, they always know Provo or Salt Lake or BYU, right? So it was definitely like kind of in my mind, and well, and especially now looking back on it, it's like, it's kind of the heart of like your average Mormon, and then like what someone thinks of when they think of Mormon, right? But yeah, like it was definitely strict. It was definitely, but I always felt like I didn't really feel part of that, right? Like just because of my upbringing and my parents like being a little bit more open-minded about things, and it wasn't like as much as like, of like keeping up with the Joneses, but like there were like, you know, bits and pieces of that. But at least in my world, in my life, like I always just felt not quite like in that, you know?
This is going to sound awful, but is it kind of because your parents had already arrived, so they weren't climbing socially? Does that make sense?
That's an interesting thought. I mean, I don't think that they would describe it that way, and I don't necessarily think I describe it that way either, but I understand what you're saying, and I think maybe, you know? Yeah, I don't know. That's an interesting thought.
I mean, we're talking privilege here, right? We're talking about Mormon privilege, not in a way that's condemnatory, but just exploratory.
Yeah.
I mean, if your parents are like designing Larry King's, you know, doing the interior design for Larry King's home in, you said Hollywood or wherever? Like
Beverly Hills. Yeah.
And your grandpa is like hanging out with Marie and the Osmonds. Like there's just a matter of privilege or having arrived where you don't have to try so hard. And maybe it can be a little bit less relaxed than those who are climbing, trying to arrive.
That's interesting.
And compete.
It could be, yeah. I've never thought about that, but that's an interesting question.
But it sounds like it saved you from a lot of the distressing dynamics of worrying about the appearance and worrying about too much how decisions might impact.
I mean, in fact, I strive to be the opposite. I strive to be individualistic and to be my own person. And like, I found a lot of like pride and value in trying to be that way, you know? But I think like even that might have tricked me into like some of the depression stuff where it's like, oh, I'm so different. I'm so, you know, like angsty and whatever. Like, I don't know. But it's really interesting actually like talking and like reflecting on these things because it's not really ever something that I've done. Like
you haven't talked to your parents about this stuff necessarily.
No, we have, but not in a way where I'm like really dissecting like my childhood and my life, like when it's so directly tied to the church. It's just interesting. Yeah.
So with your parents being like your mom, a noted actress, and your dad and your mom, noted interior designers, like you're graduating from high school, I imagine I would feel like, well, I've got to do something. I've got to be something. Like
absolutely.
My grandpa was something. My parents are both something. And I'm just a kid playing a guitar in Provo who's maybe goofed up some. You know what I mean? Like, so you're graduating from high school. Like, how are you thinking about your future at that point?
Honestly, when I graduated from high school, it was just like mission prep.
Okay.
That's all it was. I wasn't really focused on like what was going to happen after the mission or what was going to, like what my career was going to be or anything like that. It was just like, okay, time to buck up and just time to like prepare for that, right? Because it was always something I wanted to do. So yeah, between like when I graduated, so I graduated in, you know, May or June, and then the following January is when I went on my mission.
Where'd you go?
To Orlando, Florida.
So they didn't send you to where your dad went?
No. I wanted to learn Spanish, but yeah, I just went stateside, English speaking, and.
Okay, wait a minute.
Yeah.
In the Book of Mormon musical, Elder Price gets called to Orlando.
Orlando, yeah.
Orlando. Yep. That's a song in the Book of Mormon musical.
It is.
That's where he got called?
Yep.
Orlando. Do you remember? Did you see the Book of Mormon musical?
I've seen it since my mission, yeah.
Do you remember?
I do. Yep. He goes to, or he's called there, right?
But that was a bummer. Wait, was that a... No, he was excited in the musical for getting called to Orlando, right?
Yeah, so he got called to Orlando, and then like, isn't it that he has to go to like Africa or something?
Yeah,
instead, right?
Okay. Were you excited to go to Orlando?
Yeah. Okay. I was just like, you know, as like someone who's going on a mission, you're always like, oh man, I don't want to be called to like Idaho or like somewhere that is just like kind of typical or something like, right? But
Midwest or
South. And so I thought that Orlando was kind of like a good. I wanted to leave the country, honestly. But Orlando was like a great middle ground where I was just like still really excited about it, you know?
Yeah.
So yeah, I go on my mission. I was a great missionary. I was very dedicated, had a very strong testimony. I felt like and like the whole drug thing and all that was kind of like a big part of my story where it's like I did these things and I felt like because of those things I could relate to people more and could like to people's like struggles and people's problems, and particularly if they had drug problems or if they were addicted to things, like I felt like I could relate to those people and like give them a hand up, right, away from those things. So, but yeah, I just had like I don't know what word I'm looking for, but it's like I was, you know, trainer, district leader, zone leader, assistant to the president, like trained like 3 or 4 missionaries, like I just loved my mission and I like thrived there. And like, even to this day, like I don't look at it as anything that was negative. Like it was just something that was a very powerful experience for me. And I feel like I learned a lot and like got outside my comfort zone a lot. And like, regardless of like my belief system now, like I still felt like I was helping people. And I felt like I was helping people to at least try to live a better life and to be better people. Right. So I loved my mission and I had a great experience.
So you're AP. That's a big deal.
Yeah, I guess.
And I imagine, like my brother, you know, enjoyed life before his mission and then kind of like cleaned up and went on his mission and became AP. And I know that for him, that was a really transformative thing to like, okay, I've made some mistakes. I've messed around, but the mission was like that moment where it's like, all right, I cleaned up and then I made AP. And now that means the Lord must be good with me now. And now the rest of my life I'm going to be smooth sailing on to greatness. I mean, I don't know. Is that how you felt or how did you feel?
Not necessarily like that. Because I still, once again, like going back to just how I was raised, like I was just always taught that like we're going to mess up and and it's okay.
Oh.
You know, and it's like you follow the things that you need to do to, like the path of repentance, you follow that, but like it's okay and everything's gonna be fine, right? But like going on my mission, I like it very, in a serious way, like solidified my testimony and just like who I felt like I was. And I felt like, I had left all of that other stuff, like the drugs and stuff like behind. And I didn't think it was going to be smooth sailing, but it was like, I'm going to come home and every day I'm going to read my scriptures. I'm going to wake up super early. And it's just like that enthusiasm that you have and that motivation to like continue the things that you learned on your mission, right? And then I come home and just kind of quickly like didn't do those things. You know, like I woke up for the first few days early and was like reading my scriptures, and then just kind of life happens and you're home and it's like this whole new thing and you're excited to be back into like the normal world, and then you just kind of, I don't know, at least for me, just I wasn't putting as much like effort into those things. I would still pray and do all that, but like all the things that when you're on your mission and you're taught, like you need to continue to do these things and the next step is getting married in the temple, and it's like, don't forget the things you learned on your mission. It's like I didn't forget those things, but I just wasn't like doing all the things that a missionary does, right? Because I was just back in like normal life and like excited to be there. So
oftentimes people just go to BYU. That's what you do. You go to BYU. You get off your mission, you go to BYU. What was your path?
yeah, so I went to UVU for 1 semester, and then I was like, dude, screw this. Like, I was like, I don't.
You just didn't like school?
I just didn't like school. Yeah, I didn't feel like I needed to go to college to do something with my life. I don't know, and my dad like went to BYU and nearly graduated. Like I think he had like 1 semester left or something, and then just I don't remember, for whatever reason he just didn't finish, and I think he always regretted that. And so whenever I was like not wanting to go to college, like he was always trying to encourage me to go. And I think just because he had always regretted it, he wanted me to not have those regrets, right? But I don't know, it just like wasn't, I just didn't feel like it was something I needed to do or wanted to do. And my parents always worked for themselves too, and it's like they didn't use their, I mean, my dad didn't have a degree, right? But he didn't like use what he learned in school necessarily for like what he did with his life, and so it just wasn't something I wanted to do really. So I went for a semester and then I withdrew, and then yeah, honestly, like I so something I forgot to mention was like in high school I got addicted to Adderall, which was kind of a bitch in my life and caused me like a lot of just like pain and depression, honestly.
Do you want to talk about that? Like,
sure.
Some people don't even know, like it's an ADHD med, right?
Yeah.
It's kind of an amphetamine. Is that?
Yep.
So maybe back us up and just take us through that,
Sure.
how that started and how that progressed.
Yeah.
If you're comfortable.
Sure, yeah, no,
I imagine
I'm
this will help a lot of people.
Yeah, sure. So I think, oh man, the first time I took Adderall, it was like I felt like on top of the world. And it's like, what it does is it releases dopamine, so it makes you feel like you're accomplishing all these things, even though like you're not necessarily doing anything, right? It's just kind of like cheap dopamine. And so I just got like kind of sucked into that, and it's like I felt like I needed to take that to like be who I was supposed to be, kind of, and like you feel like it's this like motivation in a pill, kind of, right? And so you take it and you just like feel like you can do anything, right? So it's a very, very addictive thing, and like and when you take it and take it and take it, it's releasing dopamine, and then you get to a point where you don't really have any dopamine left to like release, and so it causes you to like be really depressed. And so that happened.
What age did you start?
17.
And was it when you took it? Was it prescribed by a doctor or just like friends had it?
The first time I took it, no, it wasn't prescribed. But then eventually I got a prescription. But I tricked myself into believing like, oh, but like I need this. Like this is something that is like helping me, right? And so it's like you justify it.
You probably Googled ADHD symptoms and you said, oh, that's me.
Yeah, 100%.
So just,
100%.
Just skipping the doctor because.
Yeah, 100%.
And by the way, for those who don't know Utah, I've heard in some ways leads the nation in prescription drug abuse.
Yeah.
It's a real problem here. And so we're not just talking about a story.
Yeah.
Yeah.
This is a big deal. And in Utah County,
Yeah.
You guys are both nodding.
Yep.
Yeah.
Probably Sandy and Draper too.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I think with kids in general, it's just and especially now, it's a huge problem. But yeah, like so many people are taking it, like, and especially in college too. Like everyone takes Adderall, honestly. But I hate that stuff because it just caused me so much pain, honestly.
So you just started taking it, and then you got a prescription.
Yeah.
And the doctor, was it pretty easy to get?
Yeah, super easy.
Just ADHD.
Yeah, I just can't focus.
Okay.
So yeah, and that was the big thing that I had to like stop before my mission, right? Because I was like, it's something that's super addicting, and so it was hard to kind of stop. And like that was the big thing where I was like, this is really what I need to do to like clean up my act.
Why'd you have to stop if you had a prescription?
Because I knew internally that I didn't like it. It wasn't something that was helping me. It was, and I knew that I was taking it too much, and I was just like the addiction, honestly, like being pulled to it, and I knew it wasn't good. But like we do these things in our minds where we trick ourselves into believing it's okay, and we justify it. But deep down, I'm like, this isn't good for me.
Mm. So you knew that.
Yeah.
So you stopped before your mission?
Yeah.
Wow. Was that hard? Did you get help or just cold turkey?
Mostly cold turkey. Yeah. I was dating a girl at the time too, who like you know, made me want to be a better person too. And like I dated her up until I left on my mission, and she helped me a lot with that. Just with like feeling like I could do that and like I should do that, right? Like women have a special way of making guys feel like they need to be better, I think. I mean, we can get into that later too, but she was a big part of that for me as well. So.
Okay.
Yeah.
So you wanted to mention that just because it's an important part of your story later.
Yeah. So going forward, like from my mission, I kind of like slipped back into that and like would justify it again and be like, okay, you know, like I need this to focus, and like, yeah, it just so easily like just slips back in, right? And so yeah, for the next few years, I'm just like trying to decide what I want to do with my life, and I'm like kind of bouncing all over the place. I move out to California to pursue like modeling and acting for a little bit. My mom helped me like get a modeling book together because of her experience with it, and I move out there and like was out there for like a year kind of pursuing that. And then a buddy of mine like...
Did you have a sense for what type of acting you wanted to do? Like,
No,
did you have a role model? Kind of like Ellie talked about Celine Dion.
Yeah.
Like roles, or is it a TV show you were trying to get, or a movie role? Or?
Yeah, so just movies in general were always a really big part of my life and my parents' life growing up. Like we loved watching movies that were like deep, and we loved talking about them and discussing them and talking about how they applied to our lives and like what the meaning was and all that.
Do me a favor.
Yeah.
Tell me 3 to 5 movies that you just really loved that meant a lot to you.
Growing up?
Yeah. The types you would watch with your parents that were deep and that you talk about it. Like 3 to 5 most influential movies.
Oh, wow, that's hard. Oh, I remember the first movie I cried in, which was Secondhand Lions.
Yeah.
Did you ever see that?
Yeah.
That's one that comes to mind. My parents just always had like, I'm trying to think of like specific movies, but my parents just had like interesting taste and like deeper things. And so I really valued that as a kid. And like even looking back now, like having these deep conversations with my parents and talking about life and talking about struggle and pain and like just what it's like to be a human, you know? So I feel very grateful for that. I'm trying to think.
Did you have favorite actors as a teen growing up, like Matt Damon or?
I mean, I loved Brad Pitt. I loved Edward Norton. I loved like Philip Seymour Hoffman. Like,
yeah, Philip Seymour Hoffman's amazing.
Yeah, you know, rest in peace. But
yep.
Yeah, and it's funny now because I'm in film and that's what I want to do, and like I finally feel like I've kind of decided like my career path, but it took me a super, super long time to get there. But I think once I was like looking back on my life and looking back as a child and like how important movies were for me and for my parents and like just how big of a part of our lives it was, like it all was like kind of starting to make sense a little bit more now, right?
So Almost Famous, was that one of the movies you saw and loved? No? That's Philip Seymour Hoffman.
I don't know if I've seen that one.
Prophet?
Kate Hudson in that?
The Prophet.
Yeah. Kate Hudson's in Almost Famous.
Yeah.
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 You like that one?
I like that one.
That's a musician one.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yeah.
I was like, I've seen that.
But The Prophet,
yeah,
you did see with Philip Seymour Hoffman. Okay. And then like, did you ever see River Runs Through It with Brad Pitt?
Yeah.
Is
yeah.
that
100%.
Okay.
Yeah. And like, I mean, I saw Fight Club and like Edward Norton. I was just like, dude, Edward Norton.
So Fight Club.
Oh yeah.
That's a deep.
I loved
like
Fight Club.
That's a deep book.
Yeah.
And a deep movie.
The Departed was also a big one. Martin Scorsese.
Oh, okay.
Right. Just kind of like the crime, like gangster movie. And anyway.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. So that's a non-typical Mormon upbringing in many ways because it's more liberal. It's less shame-based. It's less harsh, but it's more artsy. It's more sophisticated. Mm-hmm. It's obviously kind of affluent and connected, but you're an only child.
Yep.
Like, and you're not beating yourself up all the time, and you're able to experiment. And you shouldn't be doing it, but you're also not hung up on a cross of guilt and shame. And that's a non-traditional Mormon upbringing, but I'm glad we're having that story told too.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. So yeah, going forward, I guess like I just was just kind of bouncing all over the place with what I wanted to do. I lived out in Europe for a few months with a friend, just kind of like went to like 7 different countries, just kind of roughing it out there, which was a great experience. For from there I moved to Hawaii and went to BYU Hawaii for a couple of semesters. And
try school again. Maybe
we'll
figure it out there.
Exactly. I was in Europe and I was like, man, like, you know, I'm about to go back to the States and like, what do I want to do? And it's like, I was reading my patriarchal blessing actually, and it was talking about school. And I was like, you know, maybe I'll try that school thing again. It's like, if I'm going to go, like, why not BYU Hawaii? You know, why not go out to Hawaii to do it? So I went out there for a little bit and like relearned pretty quickly, like, I don't want to do this. Why did I do this? You know?
School isn't for you.
Yeah. And so from there, I ended up moving back out to California. And throughout this whole time, like I'm still kind of like experimenting with different like drugs and stuff. And it's not like a huge part of my life, but it's like here and there. And the friends I'm hanging out with, and out in California, it's like a different crowd. But throughout this whole time, like I'm still like struggling with the Adderall. And I go through these cycles where I'd kind of get addicted, and then I would have this come to Jesus moment and just like go through this depression and like, you know, pray and be like, oh, like, you know, like help me with this. And then I'd dump all my Adderall down the toilet and like be good for a while, and then I'd just justify it again and slowly get back into it. And it just ran in these cycles, and it was just like pretty bad, honestly. Like it just, like I said, it just caused me like a lot of strife, right? So now I'm
let me ask, did your parents know about the Adderall addiction?
They knew that I was taking it. I don't
Did they ever know you were struggling to get off it?
I think they did, but I don't think they necessarily knew like to the extent that it was like kind of just kind of like a problem for me. And I think because I was ashamed, like I didn't want them to know.
You told me about the time it was your birthday and your mom came out.
Oh yeah.
Or something.
Yeah, my mom came out for my birthday and I had taken some Adderall, and it just like messed me up. It just made me feel like the worst person because I felt bad.
And she didn't know.
No.
Yeah.
No.
Would you take more than you're prescribed?
Oh yeah.
Okay.
Way more. But I did have like quite a high prescription. But
I appreciate you talking about this, because this is, you know, it's one of those things that would cause people maybe some shame or some fear to talk about this publicly.
Yeah.
But if we don't talk about it,
yeah.
if you don't name it, you can't tame it. You know what I mean?
For sure.
I like that.
Yeah, so I just kind of had these like demons, like just, and it's all internal. It's all like, you just like beat yourself up a lot.
Just a shame cycle.
Yeah, like it kind of makes me emotional, like just thinking about it. It's pretty hard, you know? And you just feel like you're like not enough, like you can't be who you're supposed to be without it. It's like, it's bad. Yeah, it's bad. So like, if anyone's out there like struggling with that, like hit me up, you know, or like, I don't know, just, if you don't need it and you're going to try to take it, don't, because it can lead to a very dark place. So I wasn't expecting to get emotional, but, but yeah. And I think I'm also emotional about it because the way that I met Ellee was, and keep in mind, like this whole time I'm going to church and I'm like, and there's that conflict too of like, I know I'm not supposed to be doing these things, but like I still have this testimony and I'm just struggling with it. And so it was like each time that I go through these cycles, like it would get worse and worse and worse. And like I would get deeper into it. And finally I was just like, I'm so sick of this. Like I'm so sick of doing this. Like I'm not living up to my potential. And like, so I really had like a very like serious chat with like God and just myself. And it's like, what am I doing? Like, what do I want to do? Like, I can either keep doing this or like change, right? And so I really like made a very strong commitment to myself to stop. And like literally right after that was when I met Ellee. And I felt like that was something that like when I really firmly made that decision and it was something that like I knew I wasn't going to do anymore, it was like, okay, now I'm ready to like move on and like create a new life. And I have.
So you're saying you've been sober since meeting Ellee for the most part? Or?
Yep. So January of 2017, I stopped, and I met her February 3rd.
So you're 5 years sober.
Yeah.
In that regard.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And it's interesting, even hearing you say like sober. It's like I never even thought of it that way, but it is. It's what it is. Like I had an addiction to it. So I was not expecting to like get into all of this, but it's like, yeah.
It's good, babe.
Well, first of all, that's hard stuff.
Yeah.
That's hard to break addiction.
Yeah.
We had Austin Archer. He's kind of a semi-famous TikToker who went to Brighton High School, grew up in kind of Sandy area. He got addicted to alcohol, and he had to go to Alcoholics Anonymous. We'll add that to the show notes as well. But it's a good episode because it just talks about how hard it is when you're addicted. It's one of the hardest things in the world is to break an addiction. So, I mean, I'm really grateful, number one, that you were able to get sober, and number two, that you're willing to share it. That's a huge deal.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, congratulations.
Thank you.
Yeah. And you didn't go to AA or any of that kind of stuff. You just, yeah.
So.
Another thing that's interesting, just saying, I don't know if you feel the same way, but like what's a little bit unique about your story is that when Mormon kids goof up, a lot of times it's like parental shame or ward shame that's like the voice in their head.
Yeah.
But because you were raised with kind of liberal progressive parents that were like, oh, the atonement and forgiveness, and it's all your shame was all kind of feels like it was more self-driven. Does that make sense?
Yeah. It was
versus
both.
More external.
It was both, but I mean, when I say external, like I'm thinking like God and like my relationship with God. And I like I said, I always felt like it was something I shouldn't do, but you're absolutely right. Like it was a lot of like internal and just like my own kind of shame that I was putting on myself.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And what age were you when you guys met?
I was 21.
I was 26.
You were 26.
Right?
Okay. Before we jump back to Ellee, I'll just say one last thing. One of the themes of your story is privilege and affluence, because I'm guessing that like when I'm thinking about me, like by the time I'm a senior, my parents had been divorced, my dad was bankrupt, like I've got to go to college and get good grades and figure out a great career because my parents are broke. And if I don't make it, I'm not making it. So like that was a real motivator for me. It's different for my kids, and it was probably different for you because my kids know we're going to, we're not wealthy, but like, we're solidly upper middle class. So like my kids know if they get in a rut, we're going to help them. Yeah. And that's a different upbringing. And it's not like we're going to say cry crocodile tears. Oh, it must have been so hard to have grown up in an affluent Mormon family. But like, I almost feel like I would have chosen my upbringing over my kids because like it would have been harder to know there was that support there and that cushion there. That would have been harder because then I don't think I would have felt as hungry or as motivated. Mm-hmm. Whereas if, number one, my parents had already been successful, that would have been its own pressure because it's like, how do I live up to that? Mm-hmm. But then also knowing that they're going to support you no matter what might take, not out of any lack of character, but it's just reality. It could take away some of that fire in the belly or that drive or even that focus of, for me, it was desperation. It's like, I got to pick a major. I got to get straight A's. I got to keep my scholarship. Okay, now I have no money. I'm married. I've got kids on the way. I got to go make a living. If you don't have that kind of back against the wall stuff, if you've got more leeway or flexibility, then you're not forced to like figure it out sooner. And in some ways that would be harder. And I'm just wondering if that resonates with you or if I'm just.
No, it
stuff up.
definitely does. And I'm actually going through just like some stuff right now where I'm just like thinking back on my childhood and like who I am and who I want to be. And I think you're absolutely right. Like I was given a lot, and I don't discredit my parents. I mean, I don't like put down my parents for that at all. Like they gave me a great life, and they worked super hard for where they got into their life. Right. But like, yeah, things did just kind of come a little bit easier for me. And to this day, I'm, like I said, right now I'm kind of going through this thing where I'm trying to just like learn more about myself and get better and like kind of quote unquote fix, cause I don't think there's anything wrong with me, but I'm like kind of taking a hard look at my life and like, I want more and I need to work harder and I need to be more cause I know I can be. Right. But these like the ease of life, I think like was a little bit built into me just as a child and like just what you're saying. Yeah.
Yeah. Just to summarize, like because I have 4 kids and they're adults now. And I think a lot that like having a harder upbringing sometimes is an advantage, and having an easier or softer upbringing is sometimes a disadvantage. And it's real because we talk about privilege and money and wealth and all that.
Yeah.
And no one's going to cry crocodile tears again. But I think affluence is hard on children. I think it just is.
But don't you think that reveals something kind of dysfunctional about the system that, like, so often in capitalism, scarcity and fear are what's driving people's motivation and productivity. And I see it as a good thing that you didn't have to grow up with that, but then you're still left to like live in this system that is like driven by that, and that people like really value this like excessive achievement and productivity when like what's wrong with just being stable and, you know, kind of just like feeling out what you're passionate about. I feel like I could imagine for you it would be so much easier to get in your head about it all because you feel like you have to do these big things.
Yeah, exactly.
Instead of just being able to sort of like slowly feel out what calls to you.
Yeah, you are spot on. You're spot on. Yeah, that's exactly it. And like at the end of the day, it's just we all just are given the cards that we're given, right? And it's like there's nothing wrong with it. There's nothing right with it. It just is what it is. And it's like we just, no matter what our situation, we're just born into this world and we just have to figure out how to live and how to thrive. And it's like, this is just the cards that I was dealt, and so I'm just dealing with it, you know?
Yeah. Well, I'm reading, Margie and I are, as part of a book club, we're reading a book called The Comfort Crisis. And it just talks about how so many indicators, depression, anxiety, death by suicide, they're off the charts in 2020 at the time of the greatest affluence of the history of civilization. And you just look at like death by suicide in developing countries, even today, it's nowhere near where it is in places like Utah.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And Utah is amongst the leading states in the nation for death by suicide.
Yeah.
I don't think there's any maybe better indicator of how hard things are on a teen or young adult than death by suicide. Because I mean, when you're driven to that point, you know it's awful. It doesn't matter how much money you have. If you want to end your life, it's awful.
Yeah.
Yeah, money won't fix that.
It won't, but my point is it might make it harder.
Yeah.
There's this weird thing where the more comfortable we're raised, the more privilege and opportunity and sometimes affluence that we have, the harder it makes it for us.
Yeah.
But then I feel like even if you grow up in like a scarce environment, you may achieve like the wealth and security you didn't have, and then you still have to reckon with the fact that it won't make you happy. So it's kind of like, you know, people that have like become famous or are wealthy, like they have to, you have to reckon with the fact that that's not going to be the thing either. But for so many people, that's what keeps you pushing. You're like, when this happens, then you know, it gives you like a
And then once you get it, you're like, okay, what's the next thing I can
Yeah.
get? And the more money and the next thing.
Right.
And it's just like a
because
never ending.
we're not taught to seek out like a healthy reason for, you know, like our society's views on like meaning and purpose are like quite distorted, and so much of the time it's like we're chasing like fame, wealth, and it's not really about those things, but those things can get you out of bed in the morning, you know.
Yeah.
Yeah, and my point isn't that like it's good to be overly driven, fearful, capitalistic either. It's all as Buddhism would say, there's suffering no matter what, right?
Yeah.
There's suffering wherever you go.
Yeah.
But I do, when I look at my own children and a lot of other people's, like there's two things. There's a real mental health crisis right now happening in the United States, and it's happening in spades in Utah with teens, but really with young adults.
Yeah.
And we've already mentioned it. The prescription drug abuse rates in Utah and the death by suicide rates in Utah are really off the charts. And it's got to be at least some of these things we're talking about. And that's why I'm taking the time to kind of like at least explore it a little bit.
Yeah.
Because why is Utah leading the nation in prescription drug abuse, right? So we're going there a little bit, I guess. That's all. Any other reflections? Like, did you see any of this out in Sandy Draper growing up, Ellie?
My my little brother, like at a younger age, I think he was about 14 or 15, kind of similar, like had a friend group that just started experimenting with stuff, and he also had some depression, and I think part of it was also trying to deal with that, and he got into weed and, just some other things, and he went to like rehab for a period of time. And I think too, like my parents didn't know anything about it, and so they were just trying to protect him and trying to help him, and they're reading all like the worst things about it, and so they're just, thinking that they're helping. And I think that he left the church like shortly after. He was like 16 or 17, I think, and it was tough. Yeah. I think he moved out at like one point, and then he came back, and it was just hard for my parents to have a kid that was just like, I'm not going to go to church. I'm not going to do these things, because none of us had ever done that, And so that was kind of the first one of us, I guess, to like put a flag in the ground in a different way somewhere else. And he's just one of the best people I know, and he's doing amazing now, and like is getting his life together, and he's like just one of my favorite people. And what I admire about him a lot is like at such a young age, like he had the courage to like actually say and own like, I don't know, and this doesn't resonate with me, and I'm okay with that. And if you're not okay with that, that's your problem. And it was like he's just he's the most chill person, but he's very like grounded in who he is and his beliefs from like a really young age. And I mean, I think he would tell you too that too much weed and too much of anything is not good, And it's like, if you are going to dabble in those things, like finding a balance is really great just because it's healthier. And I think that's what he's tried to find in his life, is he enjoys these things, and what's the balance of doing them and enjoying them without becoming dependent on it. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So that was a big part of my growing up, and I was very close to him. And so, he would tell me a lot of things, and then my parents, like I was kind of in the middle of the whole situation, which I think put more pressure on me to feel like, oh, I can never do these things because I'm watching what's happening here and needing to try to keep it together and keep my brother okay, and my parents knowing these things, and everyone, trying to juggle it.
I guess there's a way both, the Mormon way of life and specifically the Mormon word of wisdom or the health code can like help a certain percentage of us reach adulthood relatively safe, relatively healthy, relatively functional. And then there's like this whole underbelly of like not understanding mental health and not understanding exploration and healthy developmental processes.
Yeah.
Where alcohol can be one of the worst possible things you could ever drink in terms of addiction and damage and harm. But then like maybe that's not viewed as bad, but then weed is viewed as horrific, even though in many cases, or even mushrooms, it's way safer.
Yeah.
Like we would all benefit from healthy adult education and discussion around substances.
Yeah.
But of all the places in the world, Mormonism is one of the worst places for that, because it's just like, it's all evil. It's all equally terrible.
It's black and white.
And it's all black and white, and stay away from it all. And people aren't, or maybe they don't do marijuana or alcohol, but then they're popping Adderalls or opiates. And they're just self-medicating in a totally different way, but sometimes in a more dangerous way. Like,
absolutely,
it's a real problem. In our culture. I'm sure I'm preaching to the choir. So.
I've been on Adderall for 10 years because I got prescribed it at BYU Idaho. I don't really know if I have ADHD. I honestly couldn't say one way or the other, but it's like BYU Idaho is where I feel like I did have an Adderall addiction phase where I was taking more than my prescription, and it got weird.
Yeah.
But listening to you share, sorry, I'm backtracking a bit, but it's making me kind of question my relationship with Adderall, because I kind of feel like I did a similar thing of tried it and then got a prescription and then talked myself into thinking I have ADHD. I don't know.
Well, and listen, I do think it is something that does help a lot of people.
Yeah.
Right.
And I will say, it did really significantly help my life, but I wonder.
Well, it's just with anything in life, you have to really look at your relationship with it. And if it's something that is genuinely helping you, keep doing it. But you have to be honest with yourself. And if it's not, maybe reconsider,
Reassess,
Yeah.
But what we need is healthy education around all these substances, even psilocybin and mushrooms, even marijuana, cannabis, opiates, Adderall. We need a healthy conversation. We need healthy education and the ability to communicate.
And being able to look at it without the blinders,
biased emotion.
Of the religion or the whatever your belief system is. You just have to look at it and see it for what it is, and decide if it's something that is. I mean, you have to make those decisions for yourself if it's something that you think is right or wrong. But looking at it from the most objective view that you can about it, I think, is the healthiest way to do it.
Yeah, and just to it's coming to me, what I'm saying is this idea of scripture is such an interesting and a powerful but problematic meme, because these things were written, in the case of the Bible, 2,000 to 3,000 years ago, right? Or in the Book of Mormon's case, 200 years ago, which is still an eternity in terms of what we know about science and health and medicine in the world. And yet we that's the source of truth. And Joseph Smith was literally just looking around Kirtland oh, people are complaining about alcohol, and Emma didn't like that people are spitting tobacco in the temple. Let me, pray to God, and okay, let me come up with some guidelines. And that's what we're all living with in 2022. What about the potential health benefits of psychedelics? What about the fact that marijuana is probably 1,000 times more safe than alcohol? What about prescription drugs? Word of Wisdom's got nothing on any of that. It's just stay away from it all, and it's all bad. And that's where scriptures turn. They give us a superficial good. And I think, Ellie, for you and me, it served us well for a time. Yeah. I'm not complaining. I got to adulthood safe and healthy, and no big car crashes, and no addictions, and no unwanted pregnancies. And it worked for us, right?
Yeah.
But then there's a lot of people that the black and white, poorly educated, insufficient both education and dialogue about these things drives things underground, where you're doing stuff that's secret, where it's hidden, and you don't really know what you're getting into until it's too late, and you're afraid to talk to people about it because it's either all good or all terrible. And it's the secrecy and this lack of education that drives a lot of this culture. And I think part of it stems from just an infantilization of relying on text that was written 200 to 2,000 years ago. Why don't we have, if the church says modern day revelation, then freaking prophets and revelators write new scripture that incorporates psychedelics and cannabis and updated medical research on all these substances, including prescription drugs, but otherwise, I think the scriptures are holding us back. I've belated the point. Samantha, what do you know?
Yeah, of course, yeah.
You see what I'm getting at?
Yeah, and I mean, I grew up in England where we would have like drugs education, and they would teach us, here's what this drug does, here's what. So we all had kind of a sense of like, okay, these are the ones that you really, really don't do. These ones, they just sound weird, and like, I don't want to go there. And like with sex education, it was like, have sex, but do this. So it's like people like me also made it to adulthood perfectly safe, because I was never going to have unprotected sex, was never going to drink and drive, was never going to do, you know what I mean? I wasn't going to do drugs because my brain wasn't developed, or, you know, didn't have any interest anyway. But it's like you can talk about all these things more nuanced, and it's more safe because you don't have like that black and white thinking where if you do one thing, it's all kind of equated together. And
yeah,
it's like better for kids to know, okay, like probably just don't do any drugs as a teenager because your brain's not developed. But like if you do, at least don't do these ones, you know?
Right.
Yeah.
It's like, okay, you know, cannabis and maybe some psychedelics, totally different class than like meth, heroin, cocaine, you know, and honestly, alcohol. I think alcohol, you could argue, is as serious or worse, right?
It's
right?
poison.
But if you watch,
go ahead.
I was just going to say, like, if you grow up with parents who model healthy drinking habits, like having 1 or 2 glasses of wine, then it's, you know, it's like not, it's fine for a 19-year-old to have a glass of wine, you know?
Well, I mean, it just goes back to it's just your relationship with that thing.
Yeah.
Right? You can have a glass of wine or 2 and it's like no big
You're
deal.
not an alcoholic.
Yeah, but then some people are drunks and it's like that's all they can do.
Yeah, and for believing Mormons out there listening, this is not like pro-substance Mormon stories.
not
I
at
still haven't
all.
tried alcohol. I've still never tried cannabis. You know, but I mean, we need to do better. We need to figure out how to have better. And I was just going to say, no young men's, you know, lesson ever, no young women's lesson ever, no Relief Society lesson ever, or no Elders Quorum lesson ever talked about more dangerous drugs, less dangerous drugs, relatively not super dangerous drugs. Let's talk about all of them and understand, right? Mm-hmm. Like, why wouldn't we be having those conversations in God's one true church, right?
Yeah. Information is power. So like the more knowledge you have, the more you can make the conscious better decision versus if you're just winging it and you're just like, I don't know, this sounds fun, or this person did it, and you don't actually have the science or the knowledge behind, okay, let me critically think about if I take this drug or if I do this thing, how will this affect me? So that's really cool that you had all that information and you could make those critical decisions, you know. Yeah. That's great. Yeah.
Yeah. And I think just going to sex, like Natasha's talked about this, good sex education leads to less unwanted pregnancies, less abortions, less rape, less assault. I think it's actually been demonstrated that a lack of good sex education leads to more unhealthy sexual activity.
Yeah, definitely.
But it's I don't want to like beat up religion or Mormonism, but it's like a lack of education and a backwards, you know, centuries to millennia old mindset that really keeps us from learning and behaving in more healthy ways. I hate to say it. I'm not trying to beat up the church, but that's how I feel.
Yeah.
No, I mean, I feel like if there's an area where you should beat up the church, like sexuality is one, because the damage is so endless. Like even just the shame cycle that like people will get in for masturbating, which is like a healthy thing to do. Like I feel like sexuality is one of the church's primary control tools because it's what keeps you in the shame cycle, keeps you, you know, psychologically dependent on them.
Yeah.
And like pregnancies and people having kids when they're not ready and like that stuff is like not small, you know, like that's a thing where it's worth beating up the church for because the consequences are really big.
Yeah. So I'm super sorry you had those experiences, Oz, and I'm really glad you were able to get sober and get well. And I'm just grateful that by sharing this part of your story, we're able to have a conversation about it, which may help other people later.
That's the goal.
Well, and something I feel like I need to say too is I appreciate you saying you're sorry, but like I look at it as a great thing because it's made me who I am, and it's made me stronger, you know? Like the tough things that we go through in life are the things that hopefully, if we have the ability to look at them in a positive way, they can be things that forge like a really beautiful like person. It's just all part of the human experience. Like, and I'm thankful for it because it's made me better.
Yeah.
And more empathetic and more compassionate. And yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Because it's certainly common. Yeah. So thanks everyone for joining us for part 1 of this amazing episode with Ellee Duke and Auz Engemann. And don't go away. Come right back for part 2, where we're going to hear all those things and much, much more. Thanks, Sam. It's great to have you with us today.
Yeah, having a good time.
All right. See you guys soon. See you back on the flip side. Don't go away. Come right back for the next part. Take care, everybody.